to ask you this, Jimmy Cook.
Yes, Jay Query.
And those listening, obviously, to play along with my question here. I want you to give to me, Jimmy, a circumstance in your life, a graduation party, a 21st birthday party, a bachelor party, whatever it might be. I want you to think up like one of those nights where you and your buddies that you experienced it with look back on and you're like, that was like just everything was perfect. Everything was fun. There were stories that we still tell of one guy that something serendipitously happened. A night like the movie The Hangover, but like in a positive sense. Give me the event in your life where that happened with your boys that you still got, that guys still sit around and talk about, and when a picture pops up on your memories, you're like, God, that was such a good time.
My friend Colin, we went to Boston for his bachelor party. Many drinks were flowing, plenty of games of beer pong, got to take a tour of Fenway Park, swing in the visitors' batting cages. Great time. Whole night.
And that was how long ago?
5 years.
So since that time, have you and the guys that you did that with said, you know what? Let's get the band back together and do it again? Probably not, because it's only been 5 years, right?
Right.
So for me, the thing that most jumps out and pops into my mind, and there's a Pacers point I'm going to make here. I had, and this was recent, a high school class reunion, which most people, I don't think, go to high school class reunions until you start getting up into the, like the 5-year reunion. People are like, 5-year? I mean, we just graduated. But my 20-year high school reunion was just an unbelievable night. Everybody kind of lives elsewhere, but we've all stayed in touch. We all got together, and guys flew in, and gals, and we had this just unbelievable night. And it was surreal, but it was fun, and it was supposed to be at one bar for a couple of hours, and then that carried into another bar, and we closed it down with this cornucopia of different groups from high school that were all just celebrating life together, and we all were closing in on our 40th birthdays. It was everything about it was magical. And for that reason, no one could wait for the 25-year. It was like, this is going to be awesome. If you weren't at the 20-year, you missed out. And then we did the 25-year, and it was cool. But it wasn't really the same because it wasn't the first. It wasn't the original. And it felt like we were trying to replicate a party and hope that it just automatically maintained at the same level of everything being perfect that it had been in the first installment. And I think a lot of people have experiences like that where you realize halfway through the night there was such a bar and expectation set before you that it just, no matter how perfect the night could go, was tough because you were comparing it to the other. And last year, the Pacers were the 20-year reunion. Everything was perfect. This group, this cornucopia of people that maybe I remember at one point I looked over and I'm like, okay, I'm watching Greg Black and Sheila DeMars and Ken Shao and Ned Zimmerman do a shot together. These are 4 totally different groups of people in high school, but now life has brought them to the point where everybody's enjoying the same event. And a year ago with the Pacers, it was like Obi Toppin and Andrew Nembhard and Aaron Nesmith and Tyrese Halliburton, which 3 years or 4 years prior, the thought of them all being on the same floor at the same time and contributing, nobody knew that, but it was this cornucopia mix that came together and it perfectly gelled a year ago. And everything went perfect. The in-season tournament was unbelievable. The game against Boston to catapult them through that was awesome. The game in Las Vegas for the championship against the Lakers and all of the hubbub of being the only game of the night in the NBA, and theoretically the whole country was watching it, was magical. And the playoffs and going up with the beauty of knocking out Milwaukee and watching Patrick Beverley lose his mind, and then taking on the Knicks, the hated Knicks, the historic rivalry Pacers-Knicks in the month of May. Pacers and Racers, perfect. Going up into the Eastern Conference Finals, NBA Finals in sight. Yeah, Halliburton gets hurt, and so you realize, like, okay, we took this as far as we could, but this was wonderful, but wait till next year. And now the 25-year reunion is here. And instantly you felt like, are we just chasing a year ago? And were we led to believe that Magic could recapture itself a second time strictly because every single bit of karma that could have gone the way of this team did a year ago, and now here they are? I went last night to the Marion Taylor game. I went to go see Pat Knight's team play and Todd Howard's team. Good game. Taylor won in overtime, but it was a good game. It was entertaining. And I'm sitting there by myself in the crowd, eating popcorn, and I'm watching and following the Pacers like Gamecast just to see the scores. And I'm thinking to myself, are they really down 16? Are they really down nearly 20 to Brooklyn? And I'm looking at the box scores, and I'm thinking, what's going on with Halliburton? I know that he's probably not 100% health-wise, but what's really going on here? And what's going on with Jarris Walker? I know he's had his moments, but he's been given plenty of opportunity here and has yet to really firmly show why he was a guy that many said, like, oh, a year later he'd have been the top 3 player picked in the draft. And the highlight of the first 3 quarters of the game is Johnny Furphy coming in and hitting a couple of threes. And yeah, they did what they have done the last few games and come roaring back to make it a game, but then you run out of gas and the other team pulls away and another loss. And I'll be honest with you. I think I speak for the vast majority of people that cover the team. I think I speak for probably even some that work in the organization. I think I might even speak for some players on the roster of, I don't necessarily specifically know what's wrong with them. I don't know that they know specifically what's wrong with them. You know, the year that they got out to such a great start in the GQ magazine year, when everything fell apart, I think everybody had a pretty good indication what was going on was just inner turmoil of chemistry. And yes, I know that there are the rumors and innuendos and urban legends about infidelities and cheating and girlfriends and whatever else. I think we've now learned over time it was not that. It was strictly, notably, Lance Stevenson going rogue more often than not away from designed on the floor what they were supposed to be doing, and it just kind of crumbled everything. But I don't know, Jimmy. With this particular group, I don't know, but they've got to figure it out.
Look,
Halliburton may not be 100%. At this point, if Tyrese Halliburton at this point, if he has an injured back and that's what's causing him to have this sort of an inconsistency, no fault of his, doesn't make him a bad player, bad teammate, bad guy. But at this point, it's probably time to say we might as well, if we're going to lose games anyway, we might as well rest him and get him to 100% so long as we believe that physically at some point can exist.
I would love for them to be able to do that. The reality is, based on where the standings are in the Eastern Conference and the fact that they are a team split in half right now, and I'll get to that in just a second, you cannot afford to rest him right now. Even as bad as they've been on the road, even as bad as they've been over their last 4, even as really as bad they've been the last month, you cannot afford to sit him with the state of the roster being what it is. Now, you get Nembhard fully back off a minutes restriction, which he's on right now. You get Nesmith back in the fold. And then if they want to come out and say, hey, he's not right, we're going to rest him, maybe plan it around, if the math goes out this way, plan it around an extended window of time, great, go ahead and do that. The issue I have right now, and there's a lot of them, but the core aspect of this team, whether it's just a weird coincidence or just their identity this season, away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse, they're the Washington Wizards. At Gainbridge, they're the Boston Celtics. You look at their splits, you look at their advanced metrics, you look at basic box score analysis, whatever you want to look at, they are a completely different team away from Gainbridge than they are at home. They are 2-11 away from that building. That is on par with the very worst, the Wizards, the Pelicans, the Raptors, who they just lost to last night on the road, or who lost to 2 nights ago, lost to the Nets last night. That is the group they're in when they're away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Is that coincidental? Is that just with everything they're dealing with injury-wise and then just the rigors is such a strong word, but I mean, the task of playing on the road, they just can't figure it out. I don't know what it is, but I'm not looking at the same team when it's a Wednesday evening at Gainbridge that I am a Thursday night in Brooklyn. And that's frustrating to me because you didn't have these type of identity crisis issues for them a year ago. All that is to say, if they can find a way to tread water on the road, I think a lot of this winds up working itself out to the point that we're not as alarmist as we are today where, hey, it's 4 in a row now in this stretch, 8 straight on the road losses. What's going on with this team? It's an identity crisis more than anything else. It's not just Halliburton. It's everybody. They are different players away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Do you think that's coincidental? Because at this point, it's a trend. Like, it's no longer for me an anomaly. It is, okay, you leave 3-1-7 and you're just not going to be competitive.
But there are games they've played here where they've gotten off to the slow starts as well. I don't fundamentally disagree with you, but I'm saying I don't know that it's even in that totality. Here's where I think we are. I recall, and I know I've mentioned this 1,000 times, but at the beginning of and I've got to think here, I believe it would have been the beginning of the 22-23 season. The Pacers in somewhat of not even somewhat, in an almost unprecedented level, I don't recall this at least, maybe they did and I just was naive to it, but they did, as I have mentioned many times before 3 seasons ago, they had all the local media that covers the Pacers come in for just a very casual and very informative and very appreciated kind of meet and greet with, I'm trying to recall who all was there. Kevin Pritchard was there. I don't remember if Rick Carlisle was, but the front office certainly was there. And they basically sat there and said, listen, we're going to ask for the assistance of you guys and gals. And the assistance that we're asking of you, and not mandating of you, but politely, professionally requesting of you, is that you inform your readers, your listeners, your viewers, which in turn are our fans, that you inform them that this is going to be a process and we're going to have to be patient. We had Domantas Sabonis and Miles Turner down low on the block, and we wanted to see how that would work, and we just realized that we'd hit the ceiling on what that style of play and that roster could do for us. So we made a trade, and we really believe in Tyrese Halliburton, and we really like this young kid, Andrew Nembhard, that we drafted in the second round of Gonzaga. He's really shown us something, and we're excited about that. We're going to see what happens with a couple of other pieces that we acquired that maybe were buried a little bit where they were previously, and it's going to take time. And we ask that you simply be aware of the fact that it's going to take time. And I remember having Rick Carlisle on when I was doing the morning show with Kevin and asking him, so what happens late in a game when you look down the bench and realize that you can win a game if you put some of your veterans back into the floor late in the game, but you have 5 guys on the floor that you really need to have them experience these moments, even though that game itself may not be the best chance to win. And, Carlisle's like, look, I can't forecast how that's going to be in that situation. But he didn't necessarily rule out in that moment, we are always going to be going for the long-term vision. So it was very clear from the Pacers front office to the fans, to the viewers, to the media, everything else. It was very clear that they were saying to us, patience is going to be a virtue with this particular group because we are starting over from scratch. And yet, they got a group that immediately gelled. They just did. And all of a sudden, you're going, wait a minute, are these guys actually pretty good? And before you know it, you're like, oh, wow. They're not just like pretty good. They like playing with each other. They enjoy each other. And look at the pace they're playing. Holy cow. I'm watching the in-season tournament in the finals against the Lakers, and the entire preview is about, like, never rule out Indiana. Why not Indiana? These guys can flip a switch and score. This is like watching Loyola Marymount UNLV, like, boom, let's go. And they get down in that final game this time a year ago in Las Vegas against the Lakers, and they're down, and then all of a sudden, here it comes. Halliburton hits a 3, and, like, Toppin gets out running, and you're like, this is the switch that can be flipped. You never know when it's going to happen. Obviously, in that game, it didn't come to fruition. But in the postseason, it did. And they continued to show when they got down in games. They got down in New York, I think, in game 1 big early, and boom, they come back. And it was, this team just has something. It just has something. Is it possible, Jimmy, now? And maybe it is a health issue. Maybe it is. Or maybe it's that teams just figured it out. Maybe teams figured out how to stop Indiana's transition. Maybe teams figured out that stepping off of Tyrese Halliburton is better than like getting right on him and letting him use that first step, or letting him step back from the logo and just pull up with some weird-looking three and have him hit it because he's in a zone for 6 weeks. Maybe teams figured that out. Maybe that's all it is. But is it possible now that Indiana, that we need to revisit back and say, you know what, we're not starting it from scratch again, but it appears as though while we accelerated the timeline of being in the elite, now we are reverting back to asking for, again, kind of a slower reset of the patience of letting us tweak and figure this out. And that begins with a couple of changes, which may be giving Tyrese Halliburton the back rest that he needs and saying, to your point, yeah, this might slide us from potentially hanging around that 5, 6, 7 region down into the 10, 11, 12 region. But so long as he's playing at this level with this level of health, and I want to be very clear, I don't know for a fact that he's hurt. I'm saying in this equation of this is the card we're pulling of this particular solution. If it is the back issue, do you then say, we now have seen what the ceiling is of Tyrese Halliburton at this level of physical contribution, and it's not good enough. So let's go ahead and go back to the patience card and let it rest, and then once it's healthy, then we go back in. Or is it also possible that Halliburton, who had some tweaks with the back in college, that this is a player that you are occasionally going to go through stretches or months or half seasons where this is what you're going to get?
Well, if it's the latter, then they're screwed because they've committed so much financially to him, and regardless of how young he still is, the trade value on a player like that, and I'm not suggesting at that stage that that's where we're at, but if that winds up being the case that he's damaged goods, which I don't think it is, then you're going to have a lot of creativity from Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan. I said this to start the season. The question I kept asking Pacers fans, I asked you guys, callers, whatever, was, yes, you had that run to the conference finals last year. And now there's this thought of you're a contender in the East and you belong amongst that elite that you keep outlining, Jake. And the question I asked was, what does a good season need to look like for the Pacers? It's certainly not this right now, but is it they needed to be a 3 seed, a top 3 seed in the East? They needed to be able to replicate the deep run they made in the tournament, or in the playoffs, rather, last year, where they're all the way to the conference finals, and you feel like they're in every game with Boston, and you could chalk it more up to injuries. And, man, if they had a fully healthy roster, who knows what happens in that series? Or is it regular season performance that leads you to a better seed? And then, depending on what happens in the playoffs, it's a mixed bag. You don't make it to the conference finals, but there's growth there. What would be a good season for the Pacers? Again, this certainly is not it. And away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse, I just mean in totality. You're right. The slow starts are across the board. The issues with slow starts, particularly Tyrese Halliburton, as we've documented on this program, doesn't matter the venue. They've been there. But they look like a more balanced, comfortable team over larger stretches at Gainbridge than they do on the road. Where I'm at is, yes, I would ask patience to be practiced from the fan base, but I would also ask it because until the wheels fully fall off, and that would include them having a homestand where they go 500 or they lose 3 of 4, until the wagon really falls apart for the Pacers, they are still in the thick of a very gross Eastern Conference. They're 3.5 back, I believe, of Atlanta for the 6th seed, and that's having gone 3-7 in their last 10 games. It's also the first week of December, and you still have a ton of season left in front of you. Now, they might not figure it out, but the layers to what the Pacers need to be between, let's say, now and the trade deadline. They need Nembhard and Nesmith back. They need to be the better connected unit they were offensively a year ago that is still in spurts fantastic, and in other spurts scoring 17 in an opening frame to a Brooklyn team that got blown out by the Bulls on Tuesday night. Like that's what your offensive trends are. And defensively, you're not even coming close to the ridiculously low bar you set yourself last year, which is, hey, just be close to the middle of the pack, maybe bottom middle, and the offense will carry the way. That combined with getting Neesmith and Nembhard both back and then figuring out what move you're going to make at the deadline to add front court depth, assuming they don't get a dynamic wing, add front court depth to a position of need. Where are you at by the deadline? Like, that's where you're mapping out this season now, because the idea of them just flipping the switch with the pieces and the short hampered roster they currently have and just running the table all of a sudden in December, I don't see it. I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon. That doesn't mean the season's lost, but I think expectations need to be hampered not just for this year, but rather for a shorter window of time as they still try to get reinforcements back and as they still try to manage whatever this is with Tyrese Halliburton. Because you're right. They haven't said he's hurt. We don't know that he's hurt. He's definitively nursing something. That much you can say. Like, the way he's getting treatment on the bench, something is aggravating him.
Tony East going to join us 2 o'clock. We will get into this conversation more in depth and have it throughout the course of the show. There has even been the dreaded T word thrown around when it comes to Tyrese Halliburton, not seriously, but just in terms of solutions and grasping at straws of what exactly is going on. But there's a lot to talk about today, including, of course, it is a Colts bye week, but we're going to talk a little NFL with Eric Edholm, who is a return guest of the program. That's going to be at the top of the hour. Dave Revsine, Big Ten Network, as Oregon and Penn State are on their way here, but most importantly, Indiana representing the Big Ten in the college football playoff and college basketball to talk about. We'll do that with Dave in the 2 o'clock hour. But when we return, a guy that ran for 2,000 yards for a college football program that at the time, people probably thought it was, oh, okay, well, this guy must be a one-trick pony because that program's not had a lot of success. But they've had a lot of success now. And he himself, a guy that played in the NFL and is now trying to successfully put together a program to help people that are dealing with some of the same health issues that he had, and it was those health issues that made his story even more remarkable. Tevin Coleman, who ran for, of course, 10 years ago, 2,000 yards for Indiana. His NFL career has come to a close, but he's back talking about college football, the Big Ten championship game, and most notably, what does he think of his Hoosiers? He's going to join us on the program just about 5 minutes from now. I want to also remind you that if you between now and the end of the year, are a member of a monthly car wash program, no problem. You go to Jiffy Lube between now, still got a couple weeks left to do it. Between now and the end of the year to get your signature service oil change, you're going to get $20 off and a free tire rotation by simply pointing to that sticker in your window, on your license plate, whatever it might be. You go to Jiffy Lube, say to the Jiffy Lube team member, look, I'm a member of a monthly car wash program. And they're going to say, we love it. You care about what your car looks like on the outside. We're going to make sure that we are getting it up the top underneath the hood. $20 off signature service oil change at all Central Indiana Jiffy Lubes and a free tire rotation simply by pointing out that sticker in the window when you roll in at Jiffy Lube, your one stop for all your vehicle maintenance needs where you never need an appointment. Tevin Coleman joins us next. Halfway through the 12 o'clock hour on today's Thursday, correct, Jimmy?
Can't confirm.
On a Thursday, Big Ten championship game coming to Indianapolis. Dave Revsine going to join us coming up about 2 hours from now, making his way for the Big Ten Network. It will be Oregon and Penn State. But right there in the thick of things, and within a whisker of not only the Big Ten title game, but certainly it would appear as though a lock for the college football playoff. And I'm going to guess that I'm going to have to repeat this for our next guest, because when I say it, he's going to say, not only do I not believe that, but I want to hear you say it again. The Indiana Fighting Hoosiers, right there with potentially a chance to play for a national championship. And a guy joining us now, one of the great players in the history of that program, who joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest line. He was a 2,000-yard rusher for the Hoosiers before entering the NBA draft after the 2014 season into the 2015 season. Tevin Coleman joins us on the program. Tevin, how are you?
Hey, how you doing, man? I'm doing pretty good.
How about your Hoosiers, man? I mean, I know that we got some important stuff to talk about with you, that you're trying to, doing a great thing here for people for the Big Ten title. But can you honestly, how far into the year were we before you were like, wait a minute, is this real?
Man, it was like probably the fourth game, 4-0. I'm like, whoa, hold on, what's going on? Let me tune in right quick. Then I started tuning in, and then it just kept going. It kept going. I'm like, wow, this is kind of crazy right here. Indiana ain't never had nothing like this before, and it's wild. You know what I'm saying? Because when I was in Indiana, we haven't been in no bowl games. You know what I'm saying? We was losing. We had a losing record every year. The years I've been there, so it's just amazing to see them turn it around and bring so much culture and energy to IU. So it's great to see.
One of the things that was told to me, Tevin, and I want you would be a really good person to shed light on this. Somebody within the program said to me, they're like, look, if you want to know the unbelievable job that Curt Cignetti did this year, they're like, you have no idea how just kind of beaten down that program was. And I mean that as a no disrespect to any player or person, but just from a facility standpoint, from a morale standpoint, from a fan base that was constantly looking for the piano over their head standpoint, to be able to turn that around and put themselves into the upper echelon. Can you speak a little bit on when you played at Indiana and were a prolific player that people enjoyed, but just did you ever have the feeling that you were just kind of up against it because of some of the disadvantages inherently the program had?
Oh, yeah, for sure, man. Definitely, because I had a 2,000-yard season, and I was up for the Heisman. I was probably seventh on the Heisman list, and we didn't go to no bowl games. So right after that, we didn't make no bowl games. I got shut out the Heisman. So it was kind of like they moved on from me, or I didn't get enough light or enough recognition to get there. You know what I'm saying? So people were saying like, yeah, it's because you went to IU and you would have went to a different school. You would have been, you know what I'm saying, this and that. But really, it was my position coach, that Dylan McCullough. He got me to IU, and I had a good relationship with him. And I think he's coaching over at Notre Dame right now, running backs coach. So, yeah, man, it's just IU haven't had that big run, and everybody been missing them and not been showing us no recognition. So, I mean, it's real good to see, and we still got a battle in front of our hands just to show the world what we can do.
Tevin, I remember that season in 2014 as a student, and, at that point, it is what Curt Cignetti tried to fight against. Not a lot of students at Memorial trying to get attendance there. You set the single-season rushing record that year. And I remember, as a student, Kevin Wilson running through the mesh halls trying to get students to come to games and getting people hyped up around the program. In that regard, as you see these overhead shots of Memorial packed to the brim, how jarring is that to see this full 180 of a fan base that's the core fans always been pretty passionate, but now to see them in full force around the program?
Man, I mean, that's all we needed just to win, because when I was playing, the stadium was empty. We got a big stadium. We got the stadium, but we just couldn't bring nobody in. It was just empty. So, and I had went to the game when they had played Nebraska, and man, it was crazy. I really got to see the fans. I got to see what Coach Cignetti did to the facility. It's just it's just a whole turnaround, and it's just amazing to see that whole school just turn around like that, man. It's nuts.
Tevin, for you personally, for Indiana overcoming those obstacles and being where it is now, and I'm, I can tell you have a pride in the fact that Indiana is like in that mix now, right? When you're talking to former teammates or whatever it might be from the NFL, you can be like, okay, Indiana, right? They're right there in that mix, but it wasn't always that way, and they had to overcome some things. For you personally,
what's that? They definitely had to overcome getting great players there, and they definitely had to change the program of the coaching. So. They did that with Coach Signetti, and he's definitely doing an amazing job with getting the players and changing this whole thing around. And as you can see, as the world can see, you feel me? He's definitely changing that culture around to a football school now instead of just everybody going there for basketball.
Are you proud of him?
Oh yeah, for sure. Hell yeah. Definitely, man.
Will you find your way to their playoff game?
Yeah, I'll try. I'll definitely try.
Well, one of the things that you're doing in partnership with the Big Ten title game, and this is what I was getting at, is, obstacles and challenges are something that I know you also had to overcome from a health standpoint. I remember midway through your time at Indiana, kind of hearing that, and I don't believe that you had, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, but let me lay this out. So sickle cell anemia is obviously an ailment that affects predominantly African Americans. You can have the traits for it before you actually get the full diagnosis, if you will. My understanding is that you had sickle cell trait, which at times would impact your fatigue level or just your overall endurance level. Obviously, you came through that as a player. And it's one thing, Tevin, to know that you personally might have some things you've got to overcome, but then all of a sudden when it goes to your children, that's a different talk show and a different battle, if you will, and a different mentality. You now know that your daughter has sickle cell anemia, and so you have decided to partner with Abbott, a corporation here, to try to raise awareness for people and fight against it and use football as the conduit to do that. Take me through just kind of the emotions of that journey and the responsibilities that you now feel.
Yeah, man, just growing up, I didn't know I had the sickle cell trait, and going through this high-level sport, this intensity sport, you know what I'm saying, playing football, I was always feeling it, but I didn't know what it was. Like, my muscles would lock up. Like, I'll get real tired, real fatigued, you know what I'm saying, and I'll feel it, but I'll just keep going. Because I didn't want to look weak, you feel me? So I kept going, I kept pushing, and sometimes I'll just black out, I'll just pass out. You know what I'm saying? And
how old were you, Tevin, before? So sickle cell anemia, by the way, is a blood disorder. It's an abnormality in your red blood cells, and so it can cause, as you mentioned, cramping or fatigue and muscle.
Sickle.
Yeah. So how old were you before you finally said to somebody, this is what I'm experiencing and I want to get this looked at?
It was college. Yeah, it was college. And then once they took my blood and everything, they seen that I had sickle cell I had sickle cell. They had changed everything with how they was working with me. So now they was giving me more breaks. They was asking me how you feeling. They was giving me more water, hydration, you know what I'm saying, getting more treatment to my body, because I wasn't doing any of that before college. Because I didn't know, you know what I'm saying? So I didn't know how to take care of my body. I wasn't drinking because I didn't know I had the trait.
Was that the first time in your life that you had felt vulnerable?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Definitely, man, for sure. I felt vulnerable, felt like I was weak, but at the end of the day, my coach, Dealin, he knew what I was going through, and he helped me. You know what I'm saying? He didn't let anybody say anything, or, you know what I'm saying? He let me rest. He gave me breaks. He made sure I was rested. I had water. You know what I'm saying? I got my body worked on and things like that. So after I did that, I started feeling better. You know what I'm saying? I can go longer.
So then, Tevin, once you became a father and found out, and if I'm not mistaken, it is your daughter that
it's my daughter
that in fact has sickle cell. What was the reaction there? What was just the overall mindset and just absorption of the fact that she had this?
Man, it was scary. It was real scary because hers was worse than mine. You know what I'm saying? She has the full thing, and it will impact her more than it will impact me. So I was definitely scared, and she's a girl, so it was definitely tough. But me and my wife, we had to lock down, do research, learn more about sickle cell anemia, and try to face that battle together. And we're doing it. She's healthy. She's doing amazing. Yeah, sometimes she has to go to the hospital every once in a while for about 2 weeks. But you know what I'm saying? We get through it. I'm there with her. You know what I'm saying? I'm present with her, so she doesn't feel that pain. So yeah, man, we just have to monitor it and make sure she's good.
Well, I commend you for it, Tevin. Tevin Coleman is our guest on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, the former Indiana football great. I commend you because I think that a lot of us, myself, I went through a health situation, right? And then I thought, and I don't have the platform you have, but I have a microphone, I guess, right? And so I thought I have a responsibility to raise awareness, not even necessarily for me, but because almost a survivor guilt. And you have taken on that same responsibility. And so take me through what it is that you're doing now to try to get people involved to assist in helping out those that either have sickle cell or maybe are unaware of and are going to need the help that is necessary from sickle cell. Take me through Tevin Coleman's mission now.
Okay, yeah. So Abbott is partnered with the Big Ten, and they're having a competition through all the Big Ten schools called the We Give Blood Drive, and it's a competition between all the Big Ten schools to see who can donate the most blood, and whoever donates the most blood, they get $1 million to the student and community health.
So you're wanting Indiana to win this, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely want Indiana to win this because they're already doing great things on the field. So off the field, we want them to win this and do an amazing job here too. So, and tomorrow is the last day to participate in the drive. So we definitely want all our fans to go out there. Even if you're not a fan, you still can participate. You still can donate blood. All you got to do is just go to big10.org/Abbott and donate. It's that easy and that simple.
And listen, I'm not a fan, Tevin, admittedly. Growing up, I was never a fan of needles, but I've gotten used to it, right? And it's really not – that's the worst part is that like 1 second little prick. And then after that, you relax. Afterwards, you usually get a donut or a cookie or something like that. Take your time for a second. It's a very easy thing that people can do. It can save a lot of lives. Big10.org/Abbott is the website. We will get that out for everybody over the course of the show today.
And so far, Abbott, through the blood drive, Abbott has saved 60,000 lives through their donations so far. So that's a lot of lives saved, and a lot of people can use it, like my daughter. Cancer patients can use blood. Accident victims can use blood. Mothers with a complication in their pregnancy can use blood. So you're saving a lot of different lives that you don't even know you're saving. So you're doing something real positive for the community.
How is your daughter doing? And how proud are you of presumably the strength that you would see in her in battling at a young age, younger than what you had when you found out?
Man, she's so strong. It's amazing. She's stronger than me when I was young. So because she has to go to these hospitals for multiple weeks, and every 3 hours they keep coming in, poking her, taking her blood transfusion, this, that, you know what I'm saying? And she's young. She just turned 7 November 25th. So You know what I'm saying? I can see it wearing down on her, tearing down on her, but she still fights and she still goes on, and that's just amazing. And I know she gets that from me and me and my wife. So it's just amazing to see her go through that and be strong, and I know she's gonna fight through it because I'm here, her mother's there, so we always gonna be here for her. We always gonna protect her. So I know she's gonna be good.
Tevin, lastly, I can't let you go without getting at least one of these from you. You ready? I just need you once to give me a who's yours, because I know you'll be pulling for him. Just one time, if you could.
Yes, sir. All right, I got you. Who's yours? Yes, sir.
There we go.
Let's
All
go,
right,
man.
Tevin, I appreciate the time. Certainly enjoy Indiana's continued season and success, but most importantly, best to you and your wife and your daughter on the success for her health and also for helping out others and touching them through your efforts. Big10.org/Abbott, where people can still sign up, give blood, and do it in the name of one of the Big Ten schools. I appreciate the time, Tevin Coleman.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. Thank you, man.
All right, Tevin Coleman joining us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Really good stuff there. And I remember as he talked about, that was late in his time in Indiana when he would come out and kind of be rotated and substituted out. You started hearing that discussion, and then people wondered how it would impact his NFL career. It, in fact, did not. Really good career in the NFL. Falcons, Niners, most notably for Tevin Coleman. Speaking of Big Ten, by the way, I mentioned it, Dave Revsine going to join us 2 o'clock hour. We'll talk a little NFL chat as well. Edholm from NFL.com, just under 15. So about 10 people immediately texted me to say, this guy sounds, not this guy, they know who Tevin Coleman is, obviously. Tevin Coleman sounds exactly like Ice Cube. And that means that I've got to tell, because Tevin Coleman plays for Indiana and we got him doing the Hoosiers, I did not immediately catch this. I probably should have, and it goes back to one of my favorite ever stories of my Walter Mitty Forrest Gump lifestyle. When I was an intern in New York City at MTV, and I originally went to intern for MTV Sports, which was kind of just like an extreme sports thing. Dan Cortez was the host. But they didn't do a whole lot of stuff with MTV Sports, so very shortly into my internship, I asked to go to a different department, and they put me in charge of, not in charge, but they put me as an intern in charge of the kind of the video archiving for a show called 120 Minutes, which was the alternative show that would air every Sunday night. And one of the days, one of my responsibilities was basically, if there was an in-studio guest that would show up, was to basically pick them up in a driving car, I guess the early advent of an Uber, and see to it that the personality would get to the recording studio. Occasionally that bled over into, because it was the same studio that was the home of Yo MTV Raps. So one day I'm at work, if you want to call it that, and they come in and they said, hey, you need to go down to the Marriott Marquis and get a guest for Yo MTV Raps. And I said, okay. And they said that the name is O'Shea Jackson. This was in 1994. Certainly, Ice Cube and NWA both were massive at the time, but it was really before the time that the name O'Shea Jackson was immediately recognized as the real name of Ice Cube. And I said, okay. So I go into the Marriott Marquis, which, by the way, was 2 blocks away from the actual hotel, and I walk in and I said, yes, I'm here to pick up an O'Shea Jackson. And I turn around, and there's Ice Cube. And he's like, what's up? I'm like, holy cow, it's Doughboy. So we get in the car, and we're riding over to the Upper East Side to the studio itself, and it's just the two of us. And, of course, what am I going to say? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, so I'm straight out of Castleton. You know, like, what am I? So literally, I wore an Indiana hat like every day that I was an intern in New York, and usually a Pacers shirt because it was the summer of '94 of the Pacers-Knicks series. I don't know which one I had on, but he immediately was able to determine that I'm from Indiana. So we're sitting there, and the awkward silence is broken where he says, so you're from Indiana? And I'm like, yeah, I'm from Indianapolis. I go to Indiana University. And there's a brief silence, to which he then says, the Hoosiers, Bobby Knight be hooping. And he did kind of sound like Tevin Coleman doing his Hoosiers. So I'm surprised that I did not immediately associate it in my mind, but several people thought that Tevin Coleman sounded like Ice Cube. Tevin Coleman was very cool in that interview. Ice Cube was cool that day, by the way. And I still have the poster for Ice Cube Predator, which is signed to Jake, Stay Cool, Ice Cube.
From that interaction?
Yes.
That's cool.
And, autographs are like taboo, right? But
whatever, yeah.
I was his gopher for the day. He was very, very cool. And, hell, he's only probably 2 years older than I am, right?
Sounds like it was a good day.
It was a good day. I messed around. I went later that day, went to West 4th, messed around, got a triple-double. No hog that day. Now, my phone I didn't dig out anybody from the phone, by the way, just so you know.
Thank you for the clarity.
I just wanted to make sure that we were aware.
I'm sure that makes Shannon feel better as she's listening to the show.
That was actually the same summer, true story, that I met a girl, the one girl that I met in New York that I kind of hung out with for like 3 weeks, and then she says, by the way, I can't get together this weekend because a guy from my hometown that I've kind of been seeing is coming into town. And I said, oh, for what? And she said, well, he's in a band. Oh, okay. So, like, what, your band? And I go, and you're from California. What town? She's like, I'm from Willits, California, Northern California. I'm like, okay. And I said, well, what does your band boyfriend do? And she's like, well, he's a drummer in a band. They just put out a pretty big album. They're called Green Day. Okay. So I was like, well, I interned at MTV and met O'Shea Jackson once. That didn't seem to carry a lot of weight, right? You got a hold of Eric, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, Eric Edholm from NFL.com going to join us next. I don't think it was Billy Joe. I think it was Trey, the drummer. And I don't know that she was like boyfriend with him, but like enough that she was like, yeah, you know what? Like I've got a friend coming in from out of town.
So you have his autograph too?
No.
He signed his sticks?
I think that was the end of the brief 3-week fling flame that was going on there, which led to nothing. It was kind of the story of my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I've done okay, but I was a slow
you and
learner.
Emily are pretty good looking together, aren't you?
Okay, there you go. Eddie, come on now. Jimmy is the one that pointed out that if you Googled yesterday during that snafu, that Derek Schultz is the third image that comes up when
That
you
was
Google.
me.
Was that
That was me.
Was that you that pointed that out? Yeah. If you Google my name and wife, yeah, Derek certainly. That goes back to that Oompa Loompa nightmare I've had. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. You can read his work and his power rankings, notably at NFL.com. Eric Edholm, who is a return guest to the program. Eric, happy holidays. How are you?
Good. I felt like I just walked into a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear or something. I'm not sure.
That's right.
That's every day on this show.
That's pretty much how this show goes, right? Is it too early to say happy holidays to people, do you think?
No. I don't know. I guess I'm of two minds. On the one hand, if I go everywhere and there's Christmas music blaring, I get a little, that doesn't work for me. But at the same time, I kind of do like the decorations and everything. So I guess that kind of falls somewhere in the middle. Yeah, I'm all right with it. I'm all right.
You did start that this week, Jake. Like I thought about it when you did it to start the week. I'm like, okay, we're diving in.
It's cold out, right? I mean, but then again, I'm like, maybe I'm a little early here. But okay, let's get to this, Eric. In terms of your power rankings, you got the Colts just kind of in that. I always call it the vat of suck. Now it's more just like this traffic jam of mediocrity. Is there reason to believe that Indianapolis can find an open lane to get out of it, or at this point, are they pretty much for the foreseeable future, including next year, who we thought they were or what they are?
Yeah, let it be known they're on the higher end of the realm of suck or whatever you called it there. Yeah, I mean there are a few escape hatches for them. Obviously, last week coming back the way they did, I mean it saved their bacon, and you credit Anthony Richardson for doing that twice in 3 games, and obviously everybody else too. But good that happened with him at quarterback. But it's we're at the point where every loss and win means that much more. And it really does. You always look back at this year and say, if this game had turned out a little differently, if we'd have won that one, if we'd have found a way to pull this game out, we'd be in better shape. So yeah, they've obviously, it's going to be a tough climb.
Eric, when we talked last month, it was just after he had been benched, and the prognostication on where the Colts were heading was a dark place of Band-Aids and rehab quarterbacks and a lot of doom and gloom for what July of next year would hold with all the question marks still up in the air. I know you highlighted, I beg your pardon, on NFL.com, where you can get his power rankings each and every week during the NFL season. The poise on that drive, putting together a 19-play drive, longest since 2001, that's a game-winning drive, and he converts the 2-point conversion. When you look from the national angle of where this franchise was just a month ago, where he was the player a month ago, to have a drive like that, what does it say to you?
Yeah, I would say he and Bryce Young have done more to kind of recoup their draft buzz, if you will, of any two players in that group. I mean, same thing with Bryce. When he got benched a little bit earlier in the season, the word out of Carolina when I started making calls was, hey, I don't know the next time he's going to play. And it felt kind of similar with Indy. It wasn't, as concrete or as firm. There was a little bit of doubt there. There was a day where the decision kind of lingered a little. So I didn't feel it was quite as closed as that other situation was, but both guys have really done a great job. And Richardson, people might downplay it because, he ran a lot. It was just really him running. And here's the thing, though. You're going up against Gerard Mayo coach team. He's a defensive guy. He played in this league. He played in the Cam Newton era. He knows how tough those kinds of quarterbacks are to defend. He's going to do everything he can to take that running element away. And so for Richardson to keep being able to blast through people and also make plays with his arm, I think that's impressive. I really do. So, he still may be a 50% passer. There are some warts to his game, no doubt. But as far as you put it, a month ago, we hadn't written his obituary, but we were cracking the knuckles a little bit and wondering what his next move would be and what the Colts were going to do. So very impressive. I always felt like he had something to him, but I also knew that it wasn't instant coffee coming out of college. I knew there was going to be some development time there, and this is a good step for the team.
Do you think we have seen enough at this point, Eric, to say definitively that he is going to be a multi-year quarterback in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be a multi-year starter. The question is whether he can pin it down and stay healthy for a whole season. I don't think this precludes the Colts from getting what I would call, like, other people call them insurance policies or bridge quarterbacks or whatever, but somebody who you feel like if you need to turn to, you can. Because it's not as if Anthony Richardson has played in a healthy season or gone through a full season without some kind of disruption in a short amount of time. But still, the evidence speaks to a little bit of volatility. And I would want some kind of pretty good insurance plan on hand, whether that's Flacco or somebody else. That's what we're talking about. But I do feel like his physical skills are so good that if you just give him a full off-season program and implore the important parts of the game where he's lacking right now, which is precision and decision-making and things like that, which are getting better, but they're still, I would say short of where the goal is, then I would think there's a real good shot he's gonna acquit himself well next year, all things considered. Again, a lot of unknowns, but yeah, I would say he's trending in that direction, absolutely.
If you had to, Eric, let's just say, obviously this isn't hypothetical, but if every team in the NFL had to redraft quarterbacks, so in other words, every team in the NFL has their current roster, but all of their quarterbacks are going to become free agents, and then you're going to have basically a fantasy football draft. Where would Richardson theoretically rank in terms of where you think the rest of the league sees him if they were, like, where he would slot, where they would draft him?
Yeah, I guess the question boils down, how do you rate – did I lose you guys again?
No, we're here.
Oh.
Apologize. You still hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, apologize.
Yeah, I would say, the question becomes, would you draft a guy like that in this scenario over a veteran quarterback? I don't think he goes ahead of Kirk Cousins, for instance. Now, Cousins, even with the last few weeks notwithstanding, is probably a more established and better quarterback overall. But, that's my point, is that I think you would trend towards younger quarterbacks in this scenario. I don't think he would go in the first 10 picks, but I think he would go somewhere in the next 10. But it would also take the right kind of team and the right mentality. Hey, we're going to revamp our offense around his skills. And that's both the exciting part and the problem. Not every team is willing to do that. They find fits to what they already run too often. I mean, I know it's gotten better over the years, but I still feel like there's some kind of retrofitting of skills into systems that, like Deshaun Watson going to Cleveland. He wasn't a great fit for Kevin Stefanski from the get-go. And so that was always going to be an issue on some level, even with, Watson, making his own bed with his own mistakes. But, yeah, I would say he's somewhere in that 15 to 20 range, I think, because of the youth and the upside and everything else.
With us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, he is Eric Edholm of NFL.com. Eric, this is both in your weekly power rankings, but also as you look forward for the rest of this season. We talked a lot about going into the year where the AFC South stood, and if the Texans were finally going to be the team, which has been the case the last 5 years, where, no, that's the front runner, that's the favorite, and then the Jaguars, wind up falling all over themselves, and Houston wins it last year. Are they finally going to be the incumbent that holds? It looks like that will be the case this season, but as you look just at the AFC South, is it Texans 1, Colts 2, or where do you see the Colts in terms of their own division right now?
Yeah, that's probably where I would put them. There's obviously, there's a lot of things holding you back on all these teams, right? I mean, Jacksonville's, like you said, a mess. Tennessee's defense has played great, but they can't prevent turnovers on offense. And Will Levis has been, even more of a project than Richardson has to this point, or other quarterbacks in that same age range. So, yeah, I would say there's a steadiness about them, and I shouldn't say steadiness, but I would say there's at least a baseline of talent on the roster that gives them an edge over the other two for sure. Houston's vulnerable though. That's the thing I keep saying. I don't think they're ready for prime time yet. They may win the division, but they could be a home underdog in the playoffs. So if you're just sort of asking about, I don't know that I trust any of the teams in that division, to be totally honest. And that includes the top two who are, in the race at this point. So Houston, I had my pause early in August around camp. I kept thinking, I don't think they're quite ready yet. The schedule was going to be a lot harder. There were, other AFC heavyweights that I had above them.
When you look, Eric, at your power rankings right now, okay, heading into obviously the final quarter of the season here, what team do you feel like is the most tenuous in where they are? In other words, they are maybe health away from breaking out and showing that there's still something left there, or the other way, that a team that's just hanging on and you feel like the bottom's about to fall out? Who jumps out at you?
Yeah, I think maybe the team that has the biggest range right now, I may say this and regret it, but the Baltimore Ravens, there are some games this year where I felt like this team is on a mission. They're going to be unstoppable, that offense. How do you plan for it? How do you stop it? Well, they've gotten in their own way a few times, and now, 3 times against good teams, Chiefs, Eagles, and I'm forgetting the Steelers. Yep, 3 games against winners, but also losing to the Raiders earlier this season, also losing to the Browns. They have, I think, as much potential, maybe more potential offensively than they did a year ago, and they were tremendous on that side of the ball. They're not good as good defensively, and now they have this kicking issue with Justin Tucker. You have an institution who's having a career worst season in a year where they're losing a lot of close games. So, that worries me about them. Could we look a month from now, like we were using, a month in the NFL is an eternity. Your Richardson example from earlier. A month from now, could they be blasting people in the playoffs? Sure, why not? But they also could lose their first game. It wouldn't stun me completely. So being out of the home field advantage mix at this particular moment really hurts them. I think they're tough in Baltimore, and that's one that just comes to mind. I guess you could say the Chiefs too, but they have a little bit more of a pattern history of a success.
Up next for the Colts will be Eric Edholm is our guest, by the way, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Your 10th slotted team right now in your power rankings are the Denver Broncos, or is the Denver Broncos. They are next for Indianapolis. Both of them will be able to kick back and try to get healthy this weekend because they're both on bye. I believe Denver is as well. Overall thoughts just on where the Broncos are vulnerable and what Indianapolis needs to focus on.
Yeah, I think there's 7 spots, like you said, separating them in my power rankings, but I don't know that there's a massive amount separating them as teams. You saw prior to this past game, you saw Bo Nix sort of playing within Sean Payton's system very well, taking, those small profits, and then when he had the opportunities to kind of make some plays, he could color outside the lines a little bit and create. But I felt like this past game, he was trying to do too much, and it rewarded him in a big, long touchdown, but also couple interceptions and a couple of bad decisions that he was lucky not to get picked on. So, I feel like when he plays within the system, Sean Payton has had some games where he has called up some brilliant games, really manipulated the defense, and they've been good on that side of the ball. When Nix has been a little bit too much hero ball and trying to make plays, they can be vulnerable. So kind of, a little bit of a they go as he goes sort of thing. But at the same time, probably a top 6 or 7 defense. Some people might say top 5. Then again, Jameis Winston kind of tore him up the other day, even with the interception. So I'm a little bit ambivalent about them overall. They rotate running backs every single week. There's no clear-cut receiving threat, outside Cortland threat that I worry about. There's I think they're a year away from being dangerous, is how I would say. So the Colts can go in there and win a one-score game, and it wouldn't shock me at all.
Eric, we were discussing this a bit off the air. With the injuries that are starting to pile up, is the conversation that I feel like's happened in the NFC, which is, of course, the Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl, has that all changed with the injuries they've stacked up in terms of a team like Philadelphia maybe usurping them in this, coronation that I feel like has kind of already happened nationally?
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you in about 10, 11 hours after they play tonight. It'll be easy. I have a feeling the Packers are going to win this game tonight just because of that factor you mentioned. I mean, they're down about Taylor Decker on offense, Levi Onwuzurike on defense, several other players up front in the secondary, the linebacker group, all three levels of their defense, which has played tremendously well this year. I mean, way better than last year statistically. You're already down Hutchinson. You're already down Alex Anzalone. It's getting real thin. If Aaron Glenn coaches a gem tonight and they keep the Packers under 20-something points, I'll be impressed, and he should get a head coaching job. But I do worry about that. I feel like that may end up being their Achilles heel, is if they can't get Anzalone back by the end of the regular season, if they can't get Hutchinson back at some point in the playoffs, I mean, it may not matter by that point. I don't know. So I think they're vulnerable tonight, and then it's going to be a test of how long they can hang on down the stretch and start to get some of their players back.
Eric, finally, if you go back and look at, say, week 1 to now, the team that has, I guess, two different answers here. The first one would be the team that's been the most active slider, up and down in terms of your power rankings, and then the other one that has been the biggest mover.
Yeah, I would say the biggest sliders. I was pretty high on the Bengals coming into the year. I'm not afraid to admit that now. I've been wrong about a lot of things over the years. That's certainly one of them. I felt like, boy, if they can just they were really competitive even in the games that Burrow lost. If they could just make a little improvement defensively, they should be pretty good. Well, they didn't. They've dropped even further. So that's probably been. Dolphins would maybe be on that list. Jets, they Browns were all kind of in that. I would say I had the Bengals like 8 preseason, and those other teams in the 10 to 13 range. The biggest riser has probably been Washington, although, I guess if I could have a slight tip of the cap of myself, it would be I had them at like 26 to start the year. Other people had them at 29, so I had that little tiny good faith bump in there, and most of it was like, okay, I like Dan Quinn as a coach. I think he's pretty solid. He's helped every team he's been on, and Jaden Daniels will be a good rookie. And so those were – I didn't think they'd win, 8-9 games. So I thought they'd be more in the, 7-8 win at the end of the season kind of team. But they've been – they've gotten back in the winning track now, and we'll see if they have any legs to them.
NFL.com, where you can read it all. Eric, I know it's a busy time, and certainly appreciate you carving out a little bit for today. And then within a week, you should probably start saying happy holidays to people, but we'll give you, we're cool for right now if you want to hold off. I get it.
Yeah, maybe by the weekend.
All right. Fair enough. It's cold here, so it counts, right? Eric, appreciate it.
Here, too. All right, fellas. See ya.
Good stuff. You
got to wait till after conference championship week. I think that's where the line is in the sports calendar.
Me, it's weird because Thanksgiving was so late, right? You go right into December. Like once the tree outside is lit, and then all of a sudden it gets cold and there's flurries everywhere. Then I'm like, okay, we're in business on the happy holidays.
Well, they
right?
just lit the tree at Rockefeller last night, so I guess you're okay.
Is it last
night?
By
that logic, yeah. At least the special was last night anyway.
Maybe
Haley's a big fan.
Tape delayed, really?
Oh yeah, Haley loves the tree lighting.
Did they have Richard Goodall singing?
I didn't really watch.
They had him out here, I think, right?
Jimmy Fallon's making up new music. I don't know. A lot of stuff going on there at NBC.
Fair enough. Philadelphia is the team that I was telling you guys, they've been good for the vast majority of the year. There's so much talk about Buffalo and Detroit, obviously. Even San Francisco, they've been banged up, but they were thought at the beginning of the year. But in Cincinnati, San Francisco and Cincinnati are kind of the same, and at some point, you're like, okay, maybe this is not the year for them. But the two teams, actually, both from Pennsylvania, that you don't hear about either one a lot, and that's Philly and Pittsburgh. They both had really good years, but yet they kind of get overshadowed. They're just kind of hanging around there, right? As really good teams.
Look, it's been a really, really good year for the Steelers, given what their prognostication was to start the year, and the fact that, Jake, I know that depending on the season, this stat, I don't know, bugs use the right word, but you think it's just a weird stat that is just, a nice way of saying you're a loser. But Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season at Pittsburgh, right? Like he always is at least 500 or better, and admittedly, it's a weird stat because you didn't really accomplish anything, but hey, great. At least you weren't in full mediocrity.
What do you mean he hasn't accomplished anything?
No, I mean, like, he has, but in terms of the last 10 years, that's the biggest mark against him. I know he's a Super Bowl winning head coach. My point is that since that moment, since they won that Super Bowl, the biggest mark on Tomlin is, okay, they're just a mediocre team where they're always 500 every year. And now, whether you want to point to them not having a first-place schedule, whether you want to point to the fact that Russell Wilson, like, that in and of itself, if you're talking about what the Steelers have accomplished this year, I will, much like the Bengals, I'll raise a hand at I was wrong. This totally surprised me. I, like many, thought Russell Wilson was left for dead after what happened in Denver. I thought this was going to be...
It certainly felt like the arm was gone, right?
A classic case of father time. His best years are past him, and he just can't play the position anymore. And even when they turned to him when he was healthy and they put Fields back to pasture, I thought it wasn't going to go well, and it has. He's played great. He's had some career high-level games. See, it's Kansas City, Buffalo, maybe Baltimore for me. And in the NFC, and I've fallen victim to this, you and Eddie both pointed it out, I feel like it's this early coronation that it's a foregone conclusion the Lions are going to be in the Super Bowl. Philadelphia's right there, but like you're right, you don't hear about them. It's Detroit. It's this team of destiny. It's biting kneecaps, and you never hear about anybody else in the NFC, in part because it's been such a down year for the other contenders. San Francisco's not there. Realistically, if you're looking at anything out of the NFC, outside of Detroit and Philly, it'd probably surprise people. I mean, Green Bay, I guess, like Eddie, I know you're on the dark horse train there for the Packers, but I still think
they were my preseason pick to win the Super Bowl.
I still think they're a piece or two away, and it would surprise me if they were in the Super Bowl. It would.
What's the worst Christmas gift you've ever gotten?
I got to think about that for a second. That's a good question. Do you have one off the top? The way you asked that makes it seem like you've definitely...
Yeah, I mean, I feel bad because the person that gave it is no longer with us. But yes, there's one that jumps out like a...
Have you come to terms with it finally now?
When did Derek die?
I did. There is one gift that jumps out at me. But, when you see the box, you see the beautiful wrap, you see the odd shape, it looks big, it's under the tree, and you're just transfixed. The whole morning, you're like, I wonder what that is. I wonder what that is. I wonder what that is. And you're super excited about it. And you open it up and you literally go, ugh, right? There are a couple of those this weekend.
On the slate.
You wonder what I'm talking about, but I'll explain and we'll get your answer next. Christmas of 1989, I would have been a junior in high school. And
You said 1989?
yes.
I was minus 9 years old.
Okay. Jimmy, you were?
-6.
Okay. Well, I was a junior in high school, and I opened up a gift. I mean, I do feel bad about this, but my parents are now aware of it. So, I opened a gift, and it was a sweater from Harry Levinson, which I don't think is still around. It was a men's clothing store, not a bad store. And I opened up this box, and of course, in high school, getting clothes is kind of like, come on. I mean, you're getting a little more into the area where it's cool, but you're still kind of like, really close.
And to be clear on that, since we know kids love our show so much, all you kiddos out there, to be clear, most of my adult Christmas list now, to your point, Jake, like 95% of it is clothes.
Of course.
Like that's where we've evolved now.
I mean, what else would you want, right? But so I open it up, and there's this sweater that the only way I can describe it was it looked like an SOS Brillo pad, but it was yellow mustard colored, like brown yellow mustard colored. And it was, I think, wool or something, but I don't even know how to describe it. So I opened it up, and I'm like, oh, it's great. And it was from my grandfather. And I didn't know what to do. And so then afterwards, once everything had settled, and my dad comes up to me and says, by the way, I'll find out where that sweater was bought. I'm assuming you might want to do an exchange on that. And I thought, oh, that is like the biggest assist ever. And I said, yeah, okay. So I made up a story that it didn't fit me. And when I took it back to Harry Levinson, they said, and I quote, like, oh, I don't know that we can – I don't know what to do with this. We haven't sold that sweater since like 1981. So then when I mentioned it, my grandfather asked what I thought of the sweater, and I told him that it didn't fit. And he said, oh, I was worried about that because I bought that about 10 years ago and was waiting for you to grow into it. And then I felt just absolutely
It's
terrible.
tough. It's a tough right hook you didn't see coming.
So your worst gift you ever received, Jimmy, was?
So thinking back, we did these sometimes gag gifts, and you didn't know if the present was going to be a gag gift or it was going to be like a real legitimate present. And it was like supposed to be a shared gift between me and my nephew. And we opened the first part of the box, and it's just a standard, brown like shipping packaging. Then we opened the second box, and it's a PlayStation 3. And it's like, oh wow, man, this is the best gift ever. Except there's another box within that
That's
box,
rough.
and it wound up being like, I think, a air filter cartridge as a joke. So yeah.
So there are a couple of, back when I would love this time of year doing holiday shopping and taking reprieve. It was always so fun back in the day when you would be doing holiday shopping out and about, and you'd stop in front of, you'd always walk past one of the appliance stores or whatever, and there'd be 20 guys standing around watching whatever game was on, on the TVs that were on display. And, usually, obviously, it's before the Colts were here, it was a Bears or a Bengals game or whatever the big game of the week was. And then there's the buzzkill of when you open up the sweater, or in your case, the PlayStation 3 box, and you're eluded, right? For example, you're sifting the channels, surfing, I should say, the channels on Sunday because it's cold and blistery out and you don't want to go outside and the wind chill's 15 below or whatever the hell it is, even though that really means 15 below. And you're all excited. And listen to some of these games this weekend.
Do we have the Guh sounder ready just ahead of time? Or do you need to do one of those and then Eddie can have it on a loop?
I'm going to give you the game and you tell me on a 1 to 5 scale, 5 being the level of Guh for the game. You ready?
5 is ultimate Guh, just to clarify
Correct.
the scale. Okay.
And 1 is like, yeah, okay. Atlanta at Minnesota.
3 Guh.
Guh. Okay.
Did you say 3 Guh, Jimmy?
3.
Guh. Las Vegas at Tampa.
4 Guh.
Vegas at Tampa?
Is this a thing? Are we doing this for all of them or no?
Guh. That's the level there. Okay.
All right.
There are a couple. Cincinnati at Dallas.
Monday Night
5
Football.
Guh. Here's why it's 5 Guh. I will defend this right now. This game should have been flexed out, It should have been taken away from our lives, but it couldn't be because they are doing a Simpsons-themed broadcast, and they already made the Simpsons animations for the graphic package, so they couldn't flex the game out. So the Simpsons are to blame for us having this trash heap of a matchup on Monday Night Football of Bengals-Cowboys.
You have certainly taken a 360 or a 180 on
Hey
the
man,
Cincinnati.
playoff hopes are dead. All right, I did what
We're
I
not
could. The
dead
Cowboys,
yet.
the Cowboys are what they are. We
Now,
know
wait
how
a minute.
bad they
now,
are.
when you say this Simpsons broadcast, this is on Monday Night Football?
Yeah, so they have one of the, you remember they did the Toy Story broadcast last year, was an alternate feed where they kind of had like the animated, like Eddie and I are probably the only three people. Maybe it was only me. Surely you watched a little bit of the Toy Story feed, no?
I did.
Okay, so I doubt you did, Jake, because it's not, I don't think, marketed towards you. It's marketed towards children and me and Eddie. Anyway.
Same thing.
They did, exactly. They did this same concept, but with Simpson claymation instead, or Simpson animation instead. But I guess the league wanted to flex this matchup out of Monday night, and they couldn't because it took too long to set up these Simpsons graphic packages to begin with. Ergo, we still get Bengals Cowboys. That's where we're at.
Okay.
Imagine that. You can't flex it out because of your own branding. You just had to get synergy with The Simpsons. And
But I'm curious because the Simpsons are a Fox product, right?
it's complicated. They're available on Disney
Clearly.
Plus through Hulu. It's a whole thing. I don't know. We don't need to get into the red tape of it all. But
Jets at Dolphins.
Forga.
Okay. Just because you want to see if Miami can sustain with Tua
I
at quarterback?
enjoy the train wreck that's happened now with the Jets, like this Aaron Rodgers debacle and the Netflix documentary and all of it, and the Dolphins are semi-fun with Tua.
We're about to wrap this up, by the way, by breaking that damn button. You ready?
Yeah.
Saints at Giants.
Infinity Guh.
I mean,
The Infinity Gauntlet.
right?
There you go, Eddie.
I mean, okay.
On repeat.
Well, just keep it there because here's the thing. And you don't even need to push it with this because at that point, people are going to check out if they haven't already. Jacksonville at Tennessee. I mean, come on.
Can you speed up the Guh so it happens more
Who's
rapidly?
starting at
hold
quarterback
on.
for Jacksonville?
Mac Jones, they put Trevor Lawrence on injured reserve.
So
Mac
Jacksonville.
Jones, Will Levis. Yes.
I mean, like, basically, who's starting for Jacksonville that is actually auditioning to become Tennessee's starter potentially next year, right? And by the way, unpopular opinion.
yes.
You guys are going to laugh at me when I say this.
Okay.
If I was Trevor Lawrence, I would retire.
So I don't think it's insane because they said the same thing with Tua. What I told you off air, we had this discussion, I think, earlier in the week to take everybody behind the curtain. Look, I'm all about player safety. If Tua didn't hang it up after everything he's been through, I'm just convinced they aren't wired that way, Jake.
I get it. There is one slight difference.
Okay.
Number one, and I can't say this isn't the case for Tua because it certainly seems like it has been. But with Lawrence, it wasn't even just necessarily the concuss to the front of the head. It was the snap of the neck and then the fact that it was literally immediately labeled and then I believe verified as traumatic brain injury.
That type of hit killed Trent Green's career. Legitimately, that exact same
that
play.
right there, I'm like, when I hear traumatic brain injury, that you don't get a lot of those.
Yeah.
And I don't mean light of that. I mean, listen, I have a dear friend that I respect as much as anybody in the world that has started the traumatic brain injury of Indiana foundation because she herself, at no fault of hers, was put through a traumatic brain injury when we were in high school. And I've seen over the course of 30 years the challenges that can create from one incident, right? Let alone putting yourself in position for another. But the amount of money that he's already received and the fact that, and this shouldn't be a factor in it, but it is, if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I look at it and I go, have they really realistically and theoretically built around protecting me and giving me something moving forward? If you come back to Jacksonville, you're right back to square one. You're probably going to have a new coach. Who knows what weapons they're going to bring in again in terms of free agency or swing and miss on. They just, their offense is stale. He has not been protected well, and he's got probably $40 million already in the bank.
About to be a dad.
I'm telling you.
It is a very human, rational perspective on that, and I'm not gonna like argue on it that I think it's like a bad idea. But this is just the greed element of the sport. You're right. He has a ton of money already, but you're looking at $24 million, $35 million, $47 million a season still owed to him. Look, if that was to happen, I think it would be one of the more stunning announcements in the sport. I don't think that's a conversation that's happening around. From that. I'm not saying play.
In no way, shape, or form. All I'm saying is, if it were me,
sure.
I'm not saying that I have any reason to believe that he will do that.
Right.
If it were me, though, I do think, however, Jimmy, that we are. I think absolutely we are getting closer to a time period and an era where those kinds of announcements are going to become less shocking. I think that we are starting to enter into an era where you're going to start seeing guys, especially quarterbacks, if they get a big check and the injuries start mounting. I always go back to this. Look, I love the NFL. Love it. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
It is a collision, not contact sport. All you have to do, and maybe it's because I'm older now, so you just start to think things differently. But if you really watch the NFL Hall of Fame inductions, and they bring guys out to walk out onto the field. Not all of them, a big percentage of them. Look at Earl Campbell. Look at some of these guys, and you're like, that guy, he can barely wave to the crowd. That guy can barely walk, and he's 60. And back then it was a different era too. I get it from a playing standpoint and all of that, but I'm just telling you. As soon as I heard the term traumatic brain injury, I was like, I don't know, man. I just don't know. I also don't know what's going on with the Pacers, and I want to get back into that conversation next. We mentioned this earlier. I wanted to revisit it, Jimmy, because I thought it was a good conversation earlier, which means this time it's going to be hard to replicate the same level of oomph, because that's the point of it. We all have had the movie The Hangover. You've seen it, right?
Yeah.
Great movie.
All-time classic.
And
for
when
sure.
I saw The Hangover for the first time, like, I didn't know anything. I'd heard people say, like, this movie The Hangover is really funny. So I went into it not knowing really anything about it. And, I mean, you start giggling from the get-go, and you just never stop chuckling because it's just one wild turn and funny scene after another, right? It's fabulous. Gosh, that was just so much authentic fun. And then The Hangover 2 comes out, and you're like, this is going to be great. I mean, you know, the Alan is so funny, and the dynamic, and Bradley Cooper's character is just a cool guy, and, you know, the Alan, like, clearly wants to be buddies with them, and then, of course, you got the guy that they crossed, and, you know, it's so funny, right? And The Hangover 2, it's like, oh, boy. They're trying too hard here. What's going on? Like, that was a funny line in the first one because I didn't expect it, but now, like, they're doing it again, and I've already seen that line. It's not as funny, and wow, this is just not working really. And last year, the Pacers' season was magical, and the Pacers had warned us 2 years ago that they were going through a rebuild process and it was going to take time. And please be patient. There are going to be times where we're going to look like world beaters, and there are going to be other times where it looks like anybody in the world can beat us. And just be patient with it because we're learning as we go with what's going to work, because we had a system in place with Turner and Sabonis and trying to use like the low block to win games, and we've got to get away from that. And we really like Tyrese Halliburton that we got in that trade, and he's got an infectious personality, and he's, you know, an optimism about him that just makes everybody feel better, and he makes people better. And we really like this Andrew Nembhard we got in the second round, and we think he can play. And, you know, we got a couple other guys that we're going to give them a chance here where they got kind of buried where they were in their first stop and see if they can flourish a little bit. And lo and behold, it happened, and it happened faster than any of us anticipated it happening. And it was wonderful last year. Everything came to fruition. You're like, oh my gosh, this Obi Toppin can play. He's a good outside shooter, and he brings like an energy and athleticism. And Aaron Nesmith, man, he can guard anybody, and he doesn't need to have plays go through him, but yet he scores when he needs to. And this Nembhard is, wow, he can hit big shots, and he's unflappable, and he can guard a little bit. And then Halliburton, it goes without saying. And it was great. And the in-season tournament, they're in the championship of it, and the whole country's talking about the Pacers and their fast-paced offense, and you never know when they're going to catch fire, and when they do, the points come from everywhere, and they come in a barrage. And then they get in the playoffs, and they up in Milwaukee, and then they go up in they relive the Knicks series, and it's great, and it's Pacers and Racers in the month of May, and that goes into the Eastern Conference Finals. And, yeah, Halliburton then got hurt, and they fell a little bit short, and they got swept, but it felt like maybe they could have won a game or two. But you thought, but what a foundation that's there. I loved it because I didn't know what was going to happen next. I loved it because every single time I thought that I couldn't smile more, another thing happened around the corner. It made me laugh again, and this is just great. And let's go through with it, and let's run it back, and what's going on? And I don't know, Jimmy. I don't know if it's time for them to say we need the urgency of patience again, because we're going to have to make some tweaks. I don't know if it's, and I do think it's this. I really do. I think it's that Tyrese Halliburton is not 100%, and he had issues with his back, I believe, even going back to Iowa State. And are they issues that are going to be debilitating forever, or issues that he just needs 3 weeks and a heating pad? You know, I don't know. I don't know that they know. I don't know that anybody knows what the definitive answer is. But the question is, have we reached the time now, or at what point are we going to reach the point in the season where you go, if this hasn't taken off yet, then maybe we need to ask for that patience again and just do a reset. I don't mean with a roster implosion rebuild, but do you rest Halliburton and say, you know what? The way that he's playing at this point, whatever he's able to produce right now has us as a middling team that's probably not going to make serious noise. So we got to get him healthy to begin with. And maybe, do you even say, look, if we can just hang around and put ourselves in position by when the weather breaks a little bit and we get into, say, late March, early April, then we try to get full healthy and take on all comers and let's go. And wherever we slot, but we feel good because now we're healthy and ready to go. There's an abundance of injury around the NBA, and maybe Indiana just hasn't addressed fully theirs, even though they've been banged up, obviously. I mean, very much so. Isaiah Jackson out, and, obviously, and I realize Wiseman wasn't a guy that we were considering to be an integral part, but with Jackson out, he was an important piece. He's gone. Nesmith being out is a big piece. Nembhard. But I really think Halliburton, something's going on there. I don't know what it is, but I'm not saying you blow it up, Jimmy, but I feel like we're entering into an area now where it is worth having the discussion of what needs to be done for temporary uneasiness for long-term health.
The answer that fans are going to have to practice is patience right now. And that is their problems on the road aren't getting fixed anytime soon. I'm not in the camp. I'm not even near the parking lot of this particular camp of you sit Tyrese Halliburton because you don't have the luxury to do it. If you want to sit him on the road, this is insane, by the way, that I'm even saying this, but if you want to sit him on the road, that's fine because they're already a bad team on the road anyway. You can't play any worse than that. I feel like, and the whole offense, metrically speaking, has taken a corner offensively at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. All their numbers are better there. They're better on both ends of the floor when they're in Gainbridge Fieldhouse. He certainly looks more like the old Tyrese Halliburton from last year when he is over at Gainbridge. When they're on the road, yeah, he looks lost. Everybody looks lost. They look like a team that, Jake, you talk about injuries being league-wide. Even though I am in the camp of Benedict Mathurin should be a starter when everybody's healthy again, you look at it on paper, they lost 2 starters. They lost 2 key starters to injury and have had to tread water without them. Fair or not, that's something that around the league, you're going to take away 2 starting pieces. Forget about the depth they lost with Jackson and Wiseman and losing them for the year and you having to give minutes to Enrique Freeman to be able to, stem the tide. And Moses Brown has been a bright spot every now and again in spurts, but you still don't have true answers behind Miles. Forget about that. Just think about 2 starters that were taken off the board from you, and you've had to try to survive without them. That matters. But from the standpoint of what does the team do, there's not a ton they can do right now other than try to figure out what is the root cause of these slow starts, because they're having those electric runs we saw a year ago still happen. They're just happening in the early stages of the fourth quarter, late third quarter, where they finally tied the game, and they're so exhausted and not a good enough team defensively to be able to get over that proverbial hump. The slow starts are what they need to figure out at their core, but in terms of them in the short term, I think fans, and it stinks because you have the high of what happened last year all the way to the conference finals, fans need to understand this is going to be a struggle bus for the Pacers until they get Nembhard and Nesmith back, but the answer, especially at home, can't be taking still one of your best players off the board because you don't have that luxury. You just don't. You don't have answers. You are furthering the equation against yourself if you were to say right now we're going to give Halliburton 2 weeks. You just can't afford to do it.
In what way you can't afford to do it?
Because he is still a valuable asset at home. Like the idea of, they're all bad on the road.
But what I'm saying is, Jimmy,
I think Jimmy's saying they don't have the bodies to go out there and compete.
I don't even mean the bodies. I mean competence. They don't have competent assets on this roster to supplant or improve giving Tyrese Halliburton an extended rest.
But what I'm saying is, because you would be sacrificing what? Being 5 games under 500?
No, see, you're looking at it from the team's perspective of what they've done on the road. They are a bad team on the road, which is why their record is what it is. Halliburton is still a valuable piece to this roster.
Road games are still an important part of your schedule.
I understand that, but Halliburton is still a net positive for what this team can be, to the point that if you remove him when you have no Nesmith back, Nembhard's getting days off on second nights of back-to-backs, and you still don't have a fluid position offensively to where Benedict Mather is not ready to just be the 1A star on this team, by association and by the collateral issue of losing Halliburton for 2 weeks to rest him or whatever, you're a worse team. Even as bad as they've played, you are a worse team
right, and that's
if you remove Halliburton.
No, I don't
you
disagree.
Can't do it.
I don't disagree. And what I'm saying is, though, if in the long run that's what you need to do to get him right, only they know. Only they know whether or not he is a rest period away from being able to repair what clearly is hurting him, or if this is just something that he is going to deal with forever and there's no repair for it. If that's the case, then I agree with what you're saying.
One thing I want to toss in here about Tyrese, they don't have as much rest as other NBA teams right now just because of the 2 games they have in Paris in January. So their schedule is a little bit more front-loaded with less rest days compared to the rest of the NBA because they have to go out to Paris to face San Antonio twice.
But I go back to...
I'm talking short-term this season, Jake. If you rest him for 2 weeks, and you can say, well, look at their record, what it is now. I believe they're a worse team without him. And if they go 1-10 over a 2-week span, I think that's insurmountable for this group to get back into the playoff picture.
Okay, and what I'm saying to you is, to me, going 1-10 and getting yourself out of the playoff picture, to me, is no different than playing with an injured Tyrese Halliburton and keeping themselves in contention to be the 9th seed and get bounced in the first round.
I'm saying rest him once you have him back.
If that's the ceiling because of where he is from a health standpoint, then you might as well go ahead and say, let's think long-term here. But again, we don't know whether or not this is something that a short-term rest is going to take care of it, and that's the real issue. Tony East might have some insight on it, and that's why he's going to join us next. Boy, I'll tell you what. I think he just said hit the wall. It seemed like the Pacers did that last night. This has just become such a dilemma for them of getting out and getting down early and then having to expend like third-quarter injury to make things interesting, but running out of gas. And I know they're shorthanded, don't get me wrong, but it is frustrating and at this point becoming, you wonder if even they know what the answers are. So we have consulted one of the best to help us break it down. Tony East joins us on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Tony, I'll begin with that. If you had to pinpoint it, the issue for the Indiana Pacers is what? Now, and I don't mean, let me back that up, the root of the issue, the cause of this is what?
They can't score. Also, first of all, my favorite fun fact based on my intro song, the song 1985 came out in 2004. So it's been longer since the song came out than the distance between the release date and the song itself.
That is an actual Jake Query style fun fact. I love it. Love
yes.
it.
So we need a 2023 or whatever remake from them, talking about 2004. Yeah, they can't score, right? Like the whole thing for the Pacers this year was the hope for them being better was top 2-3 offense like last year and a little bit better on defense. And to their credit, a little bit, even though no one wants to hear because they're 24th, they are a tiny bit better on defense. They're bottom 10 in offense. Like that just it can't happen for what this team's style and roster is that they can't score. But 35 points in the first half yesterday, 12 turnovers in one quarter, 14 turnovers in 13 minutes the day before that. And they have stretches every night where you go, yeah, look at that. Their peak is good enough to win all these games. And they have 20, 30 minutes a night where they just look helpless and terrible and can't score and can't find good shots and their rhythm's all out of whack. And, all season they've been saying disconnected, the word they kept using to talk about themselves as a team. And when you're playing bad, I kind of just thought –
Tony, did you by chance borrow Matt Taylor's phone?
That's right. We'll check back with Tony in just a second here. We're going to have Tony wrap himself in foil and then stand up on the top of his house. Hopefully there's no lightning nearby.
I did see Matt put that on Facebook Marketplace. Maybe Tony got roped in and purchased a new desk phone.
Somebody obviously is tampering with his phone because they didn't like him talking about not scoring. He's right, though. Their offense has been – they have scorers. They have players. That's the frustrating thing about it, of why they can't find any sort of offensive cohesiveness.
It's their identity. You talked about it to start the show. This is what the selling point is of the Indiana Pacers, being able to score at a high rate, and that being what blows teams away. When you eliminate that from the equation, you're asked them to be an improved team in what areas? Better defensively? That's not the identity of this group. Rick Carlisle, how often did he preach last year of just being able to be a slightly above average defense, and that would be enough because your offense is going to carry you in most games. And when it's not there, and especially when it's not there on the road, Jake, you outlined it a couple times today. They have these runs where if you're a Pacers fan, you see that run to tie the game, whatever it was, 80 last night, you're like, all right, we're back. We're over the hump. This is the offense I loved a year ago. Let's go. It's go time. And then they're out of gas because they don't have the bodies. They don't have the consistency offensively. And it's frustrating because there's moments where they have those mini runs and it looks like what was secondhand nature a year ago, but it's not consistent because they have those slow starts, they punch back late, and they run out of gas. And it's a rinse-repeat formula, especially on the road. It happened against Toronto. It happened the next night against Brooklyn. And it's a rinse and repeat cycle that for them, the only thing you can hope for is as they get healthier, that starts to unlock, whether it's freshness on the minutes, less stretches where it's like, what are we doing with this unit? And more familiarity in itself. Like, if anything, Jake, it speaks volumes to the overall value. And we talked about this when we were discussing ways to improve the roster. Who has value on this team? Nembhard and Nesmith, it speaks volumes.
Correct.
Whether you want to say glue guys or just consistent players for what Rick Carlisle's offense can be at its best.
Yeah, safe to say their value, you have seen it go up exponentially. Eddie keeps...
It looks like a Radio Shack going on behind the desk.
Eddie, what's going on? Can you fill us in on the phone situation here? You seem very.
I saw
like
you flip it upside down.
I've never seen you so intently. You look like Ralphie trying to figure out the secret code in A Christmas Story.
Yeah, hold on.
War Games is behind there.
I mean, have you seen Eddie work this intently in your life?
It's been a minute.
Like nose to the grind. Eddie was trying to figure out. He was like connecting wires and jumping through things. And
I saw him hotwire a car once. It reminded me of that.
I'm not certain.
Epic.
Here's what I think: is the phone situation with Tony? Is it Tony's phone or on our end?
I don't know. That's
You know, the
problem.
worst thing to happen to mankind is the invention. How often has this happened to you? Where you're talking to somebody, and in the middle of the conversation, they're like, "Hang on, I got to get in my car." And literally at that point, I want to say, then just call me back in 5 minutes. I don't want to sit here with the whole like transfer through to the Bluetooth.
You don't want to hear a bottle get knocked over
and
as
then,
they're
like,
trying to figure out where they're at.
It sounds like a hairdryer's going, and then like, can you hear me now? And you're like, yeah, but it's awful. Did we get Tony back, Eddie?
No, I think our phone system is down.
Okay, well, I do want to revisit one thing then while we wait for Tony and revisit our conversation that we had.
I wish
before.
people could see Eddie.
Eddie
Garrison. Eddie Garrison looks he looks like Ralphie when he's in the bathroom and his brother's got to come in and he's like, "Come on, Ralphie, your brother's got to use the bathroom." And he's sitting there and he's got his code and his Ovaltine little decoder. Eddie's wrapped himself in wires. Eddie is on the ground. All I can see are his 2 feet hanging out from behind the television cords. I don't know what's going on.
Before we went to break, we were discussing resting Tyrese Halliburton and when that is a viable situation. And I don't fully disagree with you. That would be a good path for them. What I wanted to get to, but we ran out of time to get to Tony is, and if you could meet me halfway on this, great. If not, we'll continue to be on opposite ends of the aisle with this. I think if what they're doing right now, struggling on the road, yes, but they're still treading water amongst borrow a phrase from you, vat of suck Eastern Conference, to the point that they're not fully out of the playoff picture yet. If you keep treading water like that, up until Nembhard's back off a minutes restriction, Neesmith's back off a minutes restriction, then that would be the time for me to rest Halliburton, because at that point, you have an NBA starting level point guard in Nembhard there. You have a do-it-both ends of the floor player in Neesmith, a surefire scorer in Mathurin, and you know what Pascal Siakam and Turner are with some depth behind them led by McConnell. Would you hear me out on that, or are you worried that by that point the season would be lost?
Yeah, Jimmy, what I'm getting at is I'm not certain that whatever they're doing right now is not working. And I know they're banged up. I get it, right? But I really do think that Halliburton's the straw mixing the drink.
Yeah.
And one of two things is in play here. Either Tyrese Halliburton's body is letting him down and he's not able to go full throttle, or Halliburton has not adjusted to the spotlight that's on him off court and on court of being a star. It's one of those two.
Why do you think we're able to still see, though, the games like against the Pelicans where there's the Flash is back? He's 9 for 18.
Sure.
But is that still him battling injury? Is that just he's inconsistent now because of what's hampering him?
I do think that. I don't know this, and I want to be very clear. I mean, this is all just educated guessing.
Sure.
If he has something wrong with his back, it is entirely possible that he has, back spasms, let's say, and on some days it's brutal, and other days he feels like the wind. I think that's possible. But the other thing I think that comes into play is the inconsistency, quite frankly, of their rotations. I mean, there are guys, like I said, Obi Toppin the other night looked like the best player on the floor for 14 consecutive minutes and absolutely turned their game around, and then goes to the bench and doesn't come back. And you're like, what happened to Obi Toppin? Where'd he go?
Do you think that has more to do with Siakam than anything? Because to your point, I'm with you. Ride the hot hand. And a lot of coaches don't like to do that. They like to just go by where their minutes are allocated and go to their stars. Siakam's the one that he replaced, right?
Listen, I'm open to all areas of critique and analysis, including this. Because he is an elite level in terms of his resume, established, very, very established and trusted coach who is seemingly a cornerstone of the current fabric of the Indiana Pacers with a big contract, it feels like that means that we can't in any way, shape, or form critique Rick Carlisle because Rick Carlisle's he ain't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's even placement to critique him, but if it comes to that, I don't think he should also be immune to wondering what's going on in terms of the rotations, in terms of player. I have not seen any indication, and I watch it pretty closely and from a pretty close proximity, and I'm grateful for that. I haven't seen any indication that this is a group that doesn't like each other or like their coach. That's the thing that's frustrating about it. Clearly something is different from a year ago, but there's no indication to look at it. You can tell that year when they were 22-2 or whatever it was under Frank Vogel and things just went awry and unraveled, you could tell that there were sticks in the mud.
Yeah.
This group doesn't feel that way. There's nothing about them to dislike. There's nothing about their attitude or their approach that seems off-putting or seems different. But clearly something is different. I don't know that they know what it is.
My educated guess on it is this, and I've seen this amongst Pacers fans on social media the last couple of days. The critique is, if you're going to go team run it back for a team that didn't win a championship, you're doing it wrong. And I push back on that for a number of different reasons, but in part because you're seeing why it's gone wrong this year, and it's not because they ran it back. It's because they've been so injury hampered. What made the Pacers so special a year ago wasn't just their free-flowing offense where everybody's sharing the basketball. There's always the extra swing pass. Everything's moving in pure poetry of basketball that fans here locally and nationally can appreciate. It was that every piece on this roster had a clear role to efficiency, to the right distribution of minutes, to giving star players breaks when they needed them. And you knew, especially with second unit guys, you weren't losing all that much from a how much you're getting outscored when your starters are out type of scenario. And they ran it back. And what's happened is, and it's not a full pass, but it's my educated guess for what's happening right now. Tyrese Halliburton battling whatever he's battling, hampered with the front court depth being ravaged, but most importantly, hampered by the fact that you lose two of your top pieces, however you want to define them, to injury in Nembhard and Nesmith, and they're playing catch-up now, replacing those two guys with Enrique Freeman, who I'm not like, that's not fair to him. You're not expecting him to be some type of clear, consistent NBA role player at this stage of his career. And Jarris Walker, who, to this point, where I finally come to your side of the table on this, Jake, no longer is the excuse with Jarris Walker, well, he's not getting enough opportunities. Last year there was a logjam. This year it's been, here's the keys, kid. You have nobody in front of you. Go make something of it. Like, you're replacing two stalwarts on your roster in Nembhard and Nesmith with injury with Jarris Walker and Enrique Freeman. It's asking too much of the rest of the parts.
I'm worried about Jarris Walker. I'm worried at this point about Jarris Walker. He's only 21. I get that. And it may be Jarris Walker's like Bitcoin. Like, you don't want to get rid of it if it's the next big thing, but at the same time, by the way, Eddie's sweating now. Eddie's sweating, and I think I see a watermelon gummy bag nearby. Do we have an update, Eddie, on what's going on?
Phones are not working.
Okay. Should I let Dave Revsine know that he's off the hook till next week?
I'm not sure yet. Hopefully we can get it resolved.
It looks like you've taken apart. Is that a button sitting before you? What do you have before you?
It's a flash drive.
Okay.
Did they give you workers' comp, Eddie?
Eddie left at one point. Eddie
did. He
Eddie was tangled up. Eddie was all tangled up, and then he left, and he had a wire.
Eddie, there's a coat hanger over there. You could try to use it as an antenna, perhaps, maybe for the phone.
I thought you were going a different route there.
Did you get a chance to look outside and see what the weather's like? Was there are we amidst a storm? We don't know. We're landlocked.
I did not look outside.
Okay. But Bitcoin's up over $100,000. Did you see that?
Has somebody told Jarris Walker?
They should, right?
Look, this team as a whole, this is the other thing that bugs me. And I was hoping to get an answer from Tony on this, but I'll just have to ask in my own free time, maybe. And again, apologize for the technical difficulties on our end. Props to Eddie and our department for working to get it back on board.
Thank you for being a professional, Jimmy.
Yeah, I know. I tried to save it. They're not the same team on the road. I said it to start the show. It's the Washington Wizards away from Gainbridge Fieldhouse, and it's a competent Eastern Conference contender when they're at home. And I don't know what that is, because you pointed out the slow starts happen at home also. Like, it's not like they're just a bad team out of the gate on the road. Eddie, you brought this up earlier, and I hope I can bring you in if you're not still on the grind there.
There's nothing I can do.
You brought up the condensed schedule because they're having to go to Paris. Have you noticed that affecting like the road scheduling for them specifically, or is it pretty spaced out to the point that that's a non-factor?
They've played 4 back-to-backs already in, I don't know, 23 games of the season. They've played 4 back-to-backs. I think they've only had 2 days between games twice this year, maybe just once if my memory is off there. So and I don't think they are practicing during the days between games because I don't know if they have the time or the bodies to do it.
Do you know how you know he's stressed out? He didn't say Sega Baba, and he said back-to-back twice in a sentence and didn't do it. Like, that's how locked in Eddie Garrison is right now.
But yeah, that's just my overall thoughts. I know you guys briefly mentioned Carlisle. Like, to me, when you're on the road and when you're at home, those role players are so pivotal. We talked about it during the playoffs last year. And when your role players' roles are varying from night to night, minute by minute, game to game, it makes it hard for anybody.
I think that's true.
It makes it hard for Halliburton. It makes it hard for Mathurin. It makes it hard for Toppin, McConnell.
I do think it makes it hard for Carlisle and the staff as well, though, because, again, that goes back to my point. You're having to replace Nembhard and Neesmith with
but you should
Walker and Freeman.
It should be relatively easy to know what your minutes limitation or whatever allocation is the better word there is going to be from players from night to night.
Would you agree, though, that's harder to identify when, to Jake's point, you don't know what half these role players are?
Like,
I don't know what Jarris Walker is. I don't know what Enrique Freeman is.
When Andrew Nembhard was out with the left knee tendonitis, Quentin Jackson was starting and playing 20 to 25 minutes a game. He was playing some minutes prior to that because of the Ben Shepherd injury. Then he goes to a DNP when Andrew Nembhard returns. Last night he starts, plays the first half. It is never seen from again. I thought in those minutes when he was starting for Andrew Nembhard, he was playing hard. And
he did play hard.
He was providing them a guy on the floor defensively that was giving it his all on every possession. And then he could be an energizer bunny for them offensively with some dunks and athleticism and his ability to get to the basket.
They also, though, regrettably, it's not just his fault, it's the entire flow of the team, put up 35 points in the first half. And again, that goes back to my larger issue of when you look at this roster, if Nembhard and Neesmith are back out there, how far does the rotation extend? Toppin's going to get minutes. Walker's going to get minutes. Furphy, I would assume, would get minutes. McConnell would get minutes, and Moses Brown would get minutes. That's it for me. Like, that's where your rotation is at that point, and it's not to the degree you're asking guys like Freeman and Walker and Jackson to play right now. They have a lot of guys as secondary role players.
Quentin Jackson is a prime example. Eddie, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I think this has to be taken into consideration. Quentin Jackson plays really hard and plays at a high energy, at times almost an overabundance of energy, because he has to, because he's a guy that is still trying to earn his keep, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he has to make up for what lack of natural basketball shooting, scoring ability he has, whatever, he has to make up for in those other areas by being a Bulldog type guy. Part of why he was on the floor for the minutes that he was, for the stretches that he was out of necessity.
Agreed.
Because somebody had to take those minutes. Now that those players that he was filling in for are back, it is probably still safe to say that you are a better team without him on the floor for extended periods. I don't disagree that he can still be an insurance policy for you, but I think that's why he gets relegated down a little bit. I do agree with, there was a game earlier this year, I can't recall who it was against, where they got down huge at home, and Carlisle was like, you know what? The hell with it. And he put in Jackson, Freeman.
He did a hockey substitution. He pulled off 5 starters off the floor.
He did. And he put in a group that it reminded me of, to go on the way back here, but it reminded me of the famous or infamous Indiana game at Illinois in '85 when Knight said, you know what, I'm just going to put in 4 freshmen and Nuve Blop. And people were like, what are you doing? And he's like, I just wanted to see 5 guys that I knew were going to play hard. He's sending a message to his starters. And it felt like that in that moment. And Quentin Jackson was one of those guys and did a really good job. But the longer you go with him on the floor, the more it is indicative of the fact that you're taking on water somewhere else for the most part. Yeah. The mystery here with this particular group is the fact, and I do think that there is some of this that also has to be factored in. The mystery is the fact that they do not appear to be a group that has cohesiveness issue, but they have some sort of a continuity, in particular with their offense, that last year was their calling card, was how well they could score. But what we did talk about a year ago that has to be brought into the consideration and into the discussion is, while, yes, last year, as fun as it was, and it was magical, you had to also keep in mind that when it happened, they were working their way through an Eastern Conference that was completely riddled with injury elsewhere. Sure, they knocked out Milwaukee, but they did it without Milwaukee having its 2 best players at 100%, and one of them really not at all. Sure, they knocked out New York, but New York didn't have the frontline help that they were anticipating going into the year because Randall was gone, and then now they make the move and they get Karl Anthony Towns and whatever else. The league itself, the conference itself, there was definitely a caveat and a governor on it. And they took advantage of that, and that's to their credit. And one of the things that they did all year long last year was offensively, they were literally at times humming at a stretch that was like, holy cow, this is like watching, Loyola Marymount with Jeff Fryer and Bo Kimball out there just dropping them from everywhere. And Halliburton was in this zone and on this hot streak and everything else. And for whatever reason, that has gone awry. And the easiest thing to point to, because of the other things that we've talked about, they do have a bigger spotlight on them. Other teams are healthier, but that doesn't explain going out and laying a goose egg and looking terrible against the Raptors and the Wizards, and falling up short in stretches against the Wizards or the Grizzlies or whatever it may be.
I think the injuries are if you look for the most logical answer, be it a cop-out or not, the injuries they've faced are the biggest answer for what's happened for them from a regression standpoint. I'm not talking about the loss of Isaiah Jackson. I'm not talking about the loss of depth in the front court with James Wiseman. I'm talking about not having Nembhard and Nesmith, who are proving just by not being available, I know Nembhard's on his way back, how critical they were to the flow of this team offensively. And look, maybe I'll be wrong on this. When they get them back, I think you're going to be much closer to the offensive efficiency team, both the first and second unit, that you were a year ago versus right now, where you're having to ask guys play outside their means in the back half of this rotation. And the more they play consecutive nights on a back-to-back, or the more they play over these long stretches, everything hits the fan for them, and they look lost, and they look out of whack, and it looks like they are a team that is lost on what exactly their identity is. And I believe once you bring those reinforcements back, the more you get from Tyrese Halliburton by association with that, I think they're going to be much closer to the team they were a year ago. And if not, then real reevaluation of this roster has to be made. Because that's the whole reason you ran it back. You ran it back with this unit because you thought you were going to be just as potent as you were a year ago, and you take 2 key pieces out, yeah, of course they're going to be less efficient.
Hey, Jake, maybe they just aren't that good. Effort, roster rotation, game adjustments, that's all on the coaching staff. There's an element of that, too. Like I
that's
said,
half the Eastern Conference, though.
If we're doing an autopsy analysis at this point, you got to be open to all areas of possibility. Now, here's the thing, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news. And I'm kind of a heartbreaker in general.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to break a heart next.
Oh,
I hate
boy.
to tell you guys that. I know.
So are you having a heart or not having a heart here, Mr. Vargas?
I just switched to Sanka, so please have a heart. But I am going to break someone's heart. Not Shannon's, don't worry. But
That only leaves Emily.
I'll give you a chance to brace yourself. So Dave Revsine of the Big Ten Network is just a good dude and has been really kind of a friend, over the years of doing radio and just getting to know him. And so I had messaged him the other day, hey, can we get you on the show? He says, yeah, how about Thursday? That's cool. I'll be flying in for the Big Ten Championship. I said, perfect. So this morning he texted me, I'm flying in today. My flight keeps getting delayed. I now land at 1:24, and I'm not convinced that will actually come to pass. Maybe we could move this to a later time. And the running joke, of course, always being that he has no idea when our show is and what we do. And so I said, how about 2:30, which is the last hour? And he said, oh, that's right. I got the Central and Eastern time zone thing mixed up. So that should actually work. No problem. Talk to you then.
That happens to people way more than I
Which is kind
expect.
of understandable because for you guys, you got to understand. For so many people, and I know it's been a long time now, but for a long time, Chicago and Indianapolis were on the same time zone in the wintertime. So that's why people get thrown off, right? Or maybe but half the year we were on Chicago time, half the year we were on New York time.
Sure.
So he then sent me a thing earlier, hey, I'm good for 2:30, no problems. Then I have to come around, and I simply said, it appears as though our phones are down, so I'm sorry to tell you this, but I'm about to break your heart. To which he simply replied one word, speechless. Hey. So Dave Revsine, I think next week will be good, right? Because then we'll know where the Big Ten teams are playing.
Dave is very much an evergreen voice. You can utilize him for college football, college basketball, with how crazy conference realignment is. You can use him in the summertime, for sure.
Correct.
Now, are you going to give him, another piece of station memorabilia to make up for it that he can put on his mantle?
Yeah, he told me that the koozie that I gave him from years ago, and I'm fairly certain that I saw him put it in the trash. And he said that no, in fact, his college daughters routinely fight over it. It's
That's
a
good.
Big holiday scuffle during Thanksgiving.
Goes back to the kids' metrics of the show, after all.
Kids do love. Well, his kids aren't kids anymore. That's the problem, right?
Fair.
At any rate, so the Pacers, we talked about it last night. Just not a good performance. I did go to Marion last night, watched Marion take on Taylor. I'm excited for tomorrow night to go see Taylor. Now that I've scouted out Taylor,
yeah,
right? I had never been to a game at Marion University. I have been and covered stories there when John Grimes was their head coach. He was a legendary coach, a member of the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. His name is on the court. They've got a new court over there, a new arena. It's a nice gym, really nice. It's interesting to watch NAIA basketball at that level because it truly is a below-the-rim game. Now, Marion doesn't have, Pat Knight is their head coach now. They don't have a lot of – they've got one big and then a power forward, but most of their players are guards, and so the big got in foul trouble, and they're basically playing a perimeter game. I had to laugh, though, because I'm watching a team being coached by – and it's really interesting. As I was sitting there watching it, I watched Pat pretty closely. Because, when he was a head coach at Texas Tech and then later at Lamar, it's not like I saw a lot of those games, right? So I was watching him pretty specifically just to see if any of the mannerisms or behavior or just coaching technique at all was reminiscent of his dad. And you can see it a little bit, physically speaking, but he's a pretty relaxed coach. I mean, he was pretty calm throughout. But they got down 10, did Marion early, and I had to laugh, they got back into the game immediately and even took the lead going into the half by going to a zone. And they played a really tricky zone that kind of threw Taylor out of whack for 8 to 10 minutes. But to see a guy that grew up under the shadows of Bob Knight going to a zone defense and away from the man-to-man, I thought to myself, holy cow. But I know that, he's played a lot of zone even at Lamar and Texas Tech and that kind of thing. But it was a fun night. It was a cool gym.
I also heard, believe it or not, I don't know if it was ISC that was on the production or broadcast of that, but I heard that you actually, you might not have known this, but you made an appearance. They panned over to you and talked a little bit about you last night on the
I did not know that aspect of it.
Yeah.
I knew that at one point I looked up they have a video board.
Sure.
And I saw that I was on the video board and I just kind of waved.
Shout out to my friend Rob Brown. He was on the call and he told me, yeah, I saw your boy Jake out there. We talked about him a bit on the on the broadcast. So
I didn't know that I was making a cameo.
I don't know if there was a query cam all night or not. I didn't get the
rather
specifics
exciting.
there, but
I
there
like
you go.
that.
Yeah.
But it was good to see, Todd Howard, who is helping out Pat as an assistant and formerly at Brebeuf and IUPUI, really good dude. Saw his family there as well, so it was fun. It was a good night.
Do you
overall.
feel like you were at all more or less prepared for the silent night now that you went on the road to see Taylor play?
Okay, great question, and thank you for that. Here's my thing, and this is what I still don't know, but I'm starting to get pretty good indication on this. So the guy that I'm going with, we're going up tomorrow night for silent night at Taylor, and he obviously was like, "Hey, there you go."
Good call with the Frank, by the way, Eddie.
Now this is kind of like America the Beautiful. Is there a second verse to this as well that nobody then knows?
There is, yes.
Boy, see that becomes. But I guess they wait until the end of the game to sing it, and he wants to wait until they sing Silent Night as opposed to just seeing the mayhem after the 10th point.
So you have your hotel room set now.
So I don't think – are there bars in – well, there's probably Upland Brewing, right? Upland Brewing's got to be based in Upland, Indiana. Can we go get an Upland Brewing beer somewhere?
Probably.
I mean, we got to drive home, so, there's
Party
three
at
of us going.
Ivanhoe's.
Yeah, Ivanhoe's is good, right?
Love Ivanhoe's.
Do you think maybe here's what we can do. Once they score the 10th point at Silent Night at Taylor and the crowd goes bonkers and the kids come out and they're wearing pajamas, whatever else, then they resume the game.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're waiting till the end of the game for the actual Silent Night. Now, we know that Taylor's taken on Moody Bible. We don't know the mood yet of what they're going to be of the opponent.
Here's
right?
a coin flip.
That's right. But during the time when we're waiting then for the Silent Night escapade, is that where I can go look through the trophy cases to see if there's recognition of the 1983 first team All-Taylor basketball camp honorees?
I think that'd be within your right, sure.
Because when I was at Taylor basketball camp, my roommate, here's another one. Here's an all-point bulletin for people. My roommate when I was at Taylor basketball camp, potluck roommate, by the way, was Chad Graham from Kokomo, Indiana. And Chad and I became buddies and then were pen pals. And so we lived together the next year. I went 3 years in a row. We went year number 2, and I was like, I could live with Chad again. And so he was my roommate for a second time. And we were buddies. And we wrote letters about playing back. And then I lost contact with Chad, and I don't think he's on Facebook or whatever. I've always wondered whatever happened to Chad Graham, Kokomo, Indiana, Taylor basketball camp attendee. He's probably somewhere telling people that he lived with a guy that was the first team all-camper in 1983. I still have the ribbon.
See, with how laser-focused you get with things like that, I'm surprised over the years that you haven't gone full investigator's mode and gone door-to-door in Kokomo and found this guy. Have old ladies yell at you to get off their property.
There's a thing called a phone book.
Well, the phone book, Eddie, here's the thing. Usually you get so far, and then you got to pay $9.99, and then you forget about it, and you get billed for months after months after months, all because you were looking for one phone number. I have the advantage now of simply a microphone on a radio show if anybody knows Chad Graham from Kokomo, Indiana. There's a Chad Graham that coached at Anderson, and I thought it was him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, cool. And by I think we became like Facebook friends or whatever, and I'm like, this is awesome. So I sent him a message like, dude, I'll never forget living with you in Kokomo. And he's like, what in the world are you talking about?
It was last week.
I'm like, wait a minute. You were my roommate at Taylor basketball camp. And he's like, dude, I'm from Oklahoma. Okay. Well, never mind. Different Chad Graham.
How close are we to private investigator being hired to figure this thing out?
I've always wondered. Anybody know him?
Well, surely, and I don't know if they keep this close to the chest or not, with how far-reaching this show is, surely there's a private investigator out there. Just do we have a private investigator of the company?
He is the private investigator.
Wow, Eddie.
What if Chad Graham? Do you think it's possible, though, that if I finally find Chad Graham, he's going to be like, who again?
The real Chad Graham were the friends we made along the way, Eddie.
My name is Jake. Remember we were roommates at Taylor? What are you talking about? Who are you?
Would you rather him have no idea or be like, oh, man, I listen to the show every day. Big fan.
No, I assume no one listens to this show
well,
every day. It always throws me off when someone's like, my buddy, I say buddy, Justin Suds, which is a soap company. I bought a bunch of soap from him a year ago. Love them. I'm a big soap guy. Hygiene is very important to me, and I always smell wonderful. And so I ordered more soap from Justin this year, from Justin Suds, and they showed up yesterday, and on top of it was a note that said, love the show, listen all the time. I'm like, hell yeah. Now, Jimmy, did you find a Shaq Graham here?
It's unfortunate that we could not get the Will Levis Mayo.
Look.
No. I don't want the Mayo cologne.
The reason I'm cackling over here is that I decided to just search Chad Graham, Kokomo, Indiana, and instead it took me to a Charles Graham who has since passed away, and the the obituary photo was less than flattering. Whoever looked out for poor
Does
Charles.
he not look like a Taylor basketball camper?
Charles Graham.
You tell me, Jake. You think he's hooping it up?
Yeah. Chuck looks a little older than I. Thank you. See if he's got survivors named Chad, and if so, can he track him down? Jimmy's got plays of the day next.
Today's plays of the day focus on Thursday night football and a little bit of college basketball. We'll start first in the NCAA. I'll take Purdue to win on the money line over Penn State tonight. That tipping off at 6:30. Boilermakers plus 102 is your odds there. In Thursday night football, Packers-Lions, I'll take Lions running back Jahmyr Gibbs as an anytime touchdown scorer. And I will also take
the potential benching.
Well, if that happens, then at that point your bet would be voided, so you're safe in that regard. But no, I guess I'm not buying in to potential benching. So I'll take Gibbs there as an anytime touchdown scorer. In that same vein, give me the Lions outright over the Packers. Eddie, any plays from you?
I've got the Packers outright over the Lions. I think those defensive injuries will be too much, and I think Green Bay's defense is better than people give it credit for. This is I think, a must-win game for Green Bay just to prove that they're in that conversation. So I will take the Packers, and I like David Montgomery to score anytime tonight. It was the most betted bet last week on Thanksgiving.
I think you just said most bet, right?
Yes.
Placed bet would be the
whatever.
It's all right.
All the same.
Tomato.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. David Montgomery will find the end zone tonight. Green Bay. Book it.
There you go. Eddie with a book it to close things.
Do you own a cheesehead, Eddie?
No.
Of course, I guess, how much cheese is there in Wisconsin to be able to make one of those bad boys, right?
You're talking about there's big and tall. And
Do they still wear the cheeseheads up there?
Yes.
Like, that was a huge thing.
Can confirm. Their a year ago, actually, yesterday, we made the trip up to Lambeau, my family and I.
A month ago yesterday, the Pacers won in Dallas.
How about that?
I wonder, I'm going to be in Milwaukee not next weekend, Saturday, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
I wonder how cold it's going to be up there. No more than what it is out here, I guess. That'll be an interesting one tonight because I don't know. Maybe I'm just going off of the Detroit-Chicago game, but it kind of feels like Detroit is – I think they're really good, but they're kind of prone to get one more loss before. I've always felt like you almost want to get one – like the NCAA tournament, for example, whenever you get some team that's going – that's won 22 in a row and they're 30-1, it's always like, man, are you almost better off to just get one out of the way before you go because then you're not kind of playing against the numbers, so to speak?
I think that – and I'm buying into the, cliche nature of it, but there's no team in that division that those teams hate more than Green Bay. And it would surprise me if this is one that Detroit drops because of that, combined with how good they are. I think Eddie's right. I think this is a very close game, but I ultimately think Detroit does enough down the stretch to win.
The total is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
51.5. Because I think Detroit's going to have to win via shootout with the way their defense is injured.
Last night in college basketball, Kansas was defeated. Their undefeated season is gone now. Here are the remaining unbeatens. We talked about this yesterday, almost 24 hours ago right now. I want you to tell me, please wait until I list the undefeateds, Jimmy, and then give me your pick. I made mine yesterday, and I'll repeat it. But you tell me which you think is going to be the team that goes the furthest before suffering their first loss. Rhode Island, Loyola of Chicago, Oregon, UC Irvine, Drake, Utah State, Tennessee, Florida, and Oklahoma.
Give me your team again so I don't double up.
I will say, I talked to somebody yesterday that said Drake is really well coached.
So that was
really
not
good.
yours, though.
Correct.
Okay, that's where I would go.
Utah State.
I would go with the Drake Bulldogs.
Okay.
I think the perfect scenario for that is a mid-major team that
correct.
I would clean
agree
right now.
I would agree with that. Eddie, your thoughts?
Give me Sister Jean. I'll give her a fist bump and a high five.
Here's the thing. I think karma gets
That's
them
my
because
point, yeah.
Sister Jean was sitting there waiting for a fist bump.
You want to
Everybody's
circle
seen the video.
next team to lose? It's the Ramblers because they're disrespecting Sister Jean. What are we doing?
Rambling wrecked, right?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, for those that are unfamiliar with what we're talking about, the Loyola team recently was walking off the floor after a game, and Sister Jean was sitting trying to get a fist bump, and they all, a couple of them gave her some dap, and then everybody just walked right past. They clearly just didn't see her, right?
She's 105 years old, people. Come on now. A legend.
It is
Look,
amazing,
you
right?
say that they didn't see her. Tell me she's not always there.
I mean, that's true.
It's not like it's an occasional figurehead that shows up for rare occasions.
That is the definition of bad look, right? That is a bad look. But I'm going to go with Utah State. They got a new coach, I believe, but Utah State at 8-0. I'm going to say that the Aggies. Pull up for me, if you could, Jimmy, the Drake schedule. I'll look up Utah State. You look up Drake. Okay? Now I got to figure out which. UC Irvine. Eddie, you look up UC Irvine's schedule, okay? What league is Utah State in? I should know this. Oh, here we go.
Is it Mountain West still?
They're the Mountain West.
Mountain West, yeah.
That might hurt them a little bit. Okay, the next 5 for Utah State. Utah Tech, South Florida. I think South Florida's decent, aren't they? UC San Diego. Oh, and then St. Mary's. Our boy Randy Bennett at St. Mary's. They might trip up there, okay? Who you got, Jimmy?
Drake also has one of those in the mix. They go at Valpo versus St. Ambrose, but noted powerhouse. On the road at Kansas State against the Fighting Doug Gottliebs, who got wrecked. Shout out last night, Paul Casaro and the Jaguars getting a win there.
Yeah, to come from behind to win.
Indeed. And then Belmont at home. Their next 5.
Eddie, who's UC Irvine got?
UC Irvine, Cal State Bakersfield, at Oregon State, at Belmont, at Duquesne, at California Baptist. Those are the games for the rest of 2024.
I would think Oregon State could get them, right?
Now, if you're curious about Loyola Chicago, South Florida, San Francisco, I can't say that school, Oakland. That's the rest of their 2024.
I can't say that school. Does it have a naughty word?
Is that I can't say that school college, or I can't say that school university?
University.
Okay.
School I can't say. I just don't know how to pronounce it.
So it's not like a moral thing.
What's the first letter of the school?
C.
Now, is that you speaking Spanish again, or is that you saying?
No, that's the letter C.
Wait, this is whose schedule?
Loyola Chicago.
Well, is it is it a team
Chicago
in the Horizon?
No.
Or not the Horizon. What is Loyola in now?
They're in the
Big
Big
West. They're in
West.
the Mobile, right?
Big West. No, sorry, Atlantic 10. Atlantic 10.
Yeah,
I was thinking of
A10.
UC
That's
Irvine.
right, A10. It's been hard for me to keep track of where some of these are gone. J&B's up next. We'll get to you in just a second. But first, I want to check this schedule and see if I can figure out the name of the school that Eddie is talking about. This makes for great radio for me to be looking.
So
sitting here while
I will give Eddie a slight pass because I always butcher this one as well.
Yeah, hold on.
You want to wait till you find it, or do you just walk over here?
I just said Canisius, right?
Yeah.
Is that who it is?
Canisius. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. There you go.
Eddie, repeat it to me. Can. Ish.
Yes. Canisius.
Anyway, it doesn't matter because Loyola have lost
Now
by
spell
then
it.
because they disrespected Sister Jean. Come on, Ramblers, be better.
Canisius, the Golden Griffins, by the way.
Broke a 105-year-old's heart. What are we doing?
It is brutal. J&B is up next. He is on remote, and we will be back with you. Jimmy, you're gone tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I'm going tomorrow on Monday. Be back in here Tuesday.
Jimmy getting to take a little holiday time, understandable, on a Colts bye week. But we'll be back with you tomorrow, and we'll see if the phone lines work at noon, and we'll be with you until 3. Thank you for listening to Query & Company.